I won more medals for Canada than any other athlete at the Salt Lake Games, Olympic or Paralympic. I was born with my disability, so the last thing in the world that I thought I would ever become was an athlete. So it's funny to me that I'm now a retired athlete and about to be the co-chef de mission for the Paralympic team in Paris. Somewhere deep inside was a little spark that started when I was really little. And even when I'm at my lowest and crying and stuff, I think it's still in there. And I think every human being actually has that.
Together, we're going to meet the most singular individuals, entrepreneurs, artists, athletes. If you love the show, the only thing I'm going to ever ask you is to subscribe and share to your friends. I cannot express how much this helped me bring you the most exceptional guests. Thanks so much. Enjoy the show. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Karolina.
I'm happy to be here.
Yes, same. So today we're going to talk about a lot of different things. We're going to talk mostly about sports, right? I'm very happy because when I started this podcast, I wanted to interview 3 categories of individuals: entrepreneurs, artists, and athletes. And you are the first professional athlete that I'm interviewing, so I'm very excited. I'm going really into unknown territory today. If I'm asking a lot of random questions and stupid questions, maybe I apologize. We're going to talk about Paralympics 2, which is also a specific category of the athletic world, which is very unknown to many, me including. So it's going to be very interesting to debunk a little bit all the perceptions, or trying to understand what does it mean to be Paralympic athletes today. In less than 100 days, we're going to have the Olympic Games in Paris, so we're going to talk about that as well. So before we start going through all of that, right, it would be easy to introduce you saying that you had 8 Paralympics medals, 18 IPC World Cup, no?
No, that's wrong. Okay. But it's not you that's wrong. It's some random bio that's online that people keep quoting, and it's not. The 8 Paralympic medals is correct, but the World Cup podiums, there were way more. There were way more than that. My father was like, "You had 18 in a season." I said, "I know. I don't know where they got this."
Did you keep track?
I didn't. This is the problem. But I know, because I know how many World Cups I raced, and I have the trophies in my apartment. So there are more than 18. Well, they're just they're kind of stored away. But anyway, it's not your fault. Everybody quotes that bio.
No problem. So
I have to figure out where it came from.
So figure out, send to me the real number, and I'm going to edit the Wikipedia page.
I need to update my Wiki. I didn't do it. An Australian student in sport. This is the bringing together of sport made my Wikipedia page. So maybe that's where it comes from. And they don't even, I don't know who it was. Some student in Australia decided to create my Wikipedia page.
It's amazing.
I had no idea.
So we're going to go through all those medals, all those competitions, but those medals aside, I would like you to introduce yourself and tell me who you are as an individual, a human being.
Okay. Well, hello. I'm very happy. Yes, I guess I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's a beautiful day here in Montreal. I am, as an individual, I think it's interesting to me still that professionally I'm identified as an athlete, because growing up, I was born with my disability. So the last thing in the world that I thought I would ever become was an athlete. So, and not just me, I think all my schoolmates and teachers and everyone around, nobody thought that I would become an athlete. I mean, I did sports and I enjoyed them, but that wasn't really my goal. We were chatting earlier, I was more intellectually inclined. So it's funny to me that I'm now a retired athlete and about to be the co-chef de mission for the Paralympic team in Paris. But I think as a human being, I think all these experiences that we'll talk about more in depth have, everyone's life experience and everything that they experience personally, it does shape them and it does turn them a bit into who they are. And so I think I would like to draw on those experiences as a Paralympic athlete, an athlete with a disability, a person with a disability, in my role as co-chef and just in my day-to-day life. I think what it has enabled me to be is more empathetic than maybe other people. I can really, can I tell you something that happened just earlier this year? I was on a site visit to Paris, the one and only site visit I did before the games in January to Paris. And then I decided to stay in Europe a little bit. And I went back to Poland, where I'm from. And I hadn't been there in 12 years, which is a really long time. And I was talking to my cousin. We're exactly the same age. We're 8 days apart. And we were talking about a book about dyslexia, actually. And anyway, that got us talking. And the book is called The Gift of Dyslexia. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, I wonder what the gift of cerebral palsy is. Cerebral palsy is my disability. And I just kind of said it. And I haven't seen my cousin in years. And she very calmly and just directly said, well, she says, I think it gives you the gift to see people for who they are. And I had never thought of that. And this is just now this January that we had this conversation, and it really surprised me. So I've been thinking about that a lot in terms of maybe having my disability and being born with my disability. It's not that I can see into people's souls or anything like this, but I think I'm maybe not as likely to be intrigued by just a person's exterior.
I understand. Yeah. Would you say that it's because over the years you have been into this ecosystem where the exterior, as you mentioned, was not really what was important, or is it because you also had the frustration of not being seen as something else as your exterior?
That's such a good question. It's the second one. Yeah, absolutely. Because, okay, so I was a Paralympian. I was a high performance athlete. So the other Paralympians that I know, maybe we're not like most disabled people. We were young, we were athletic, we were fit. Some were terribly good looking. So it still affects you. But I think it's more the second. It's that I felt, especially in those difficult years when you're a teenage, when you're 14, 15. But even now, I sometimes feel that that's all that people see. Like if they see me walking down the street, and I can tell who those people are. They unfortunately, and I don't hold it against them. It's human curiosity. And I am a big fan of curiosity, but there's a way to show it, like the way a child shows innocent and real curiosity towards something or someone, versus some adults, because it's only ever really adults who kind of still, will look at me like, oh, and I think really it's not so scary. I just have a different way of walking. So it's not, I don't think of it as a big thing, because it's all I've ever known. So it always surprises me when people look at me askance. But I think that's what it is that, it's more that I still feel, as you put it much better than I did, that people look at me that I'm slightly different. Yeah.
Would you say that it's something that evolved over the years from both you as an individual perceiving those eyes, but also the society changing the way they perceive disabilities?
I can only really speak to my personal lived experience. I don't know about society vis-a-vis me. So this is going to be a long answer. For me, it's evolved. I think it's up and down. So it goes in cycle. It's up and down. It's not a straight line. It's not as if I've felt necessarily more secure. It wasn't a direct evolution or a direct growth. It's very up and down. I think a lot of it has to do with whatever's happening in my life. So, at the top of my Paralympic skiing career, first of all, I was so immersed in being surrounded by other people with disabilities, not that many with my disability, but still. And I was so focused on what I was doing that it didn't really matter. But we had able-bodied coaches too, and sometimes they would say and do things that were really not cool. Then you're reminded, you're like, oh. So there's that. I think, so it just goes in phases. And actually right now, I think I'm maybe not in the super best phase, but I'm hoping to kind of feel a bit better about it all by the time Paris rolls around. And then in terms of society, I definitely think if I look at when I started in the Paralympics and, whether I was an athlete or involved in some other way, I've been involved for such a long time, there has been a huge improvement worldwide. The London Paralympics in 2012, which were summer Paralympics, really, I think, did an amazing job of putting the Paralympic Games and Paralympic athletes on the map. And I was there with my job at the time, and I'd already retired. But it was funny to me that less than 2 years earlier, I had competed at the 2010 Paralympics in Canada, in Vancouver, and it was great. But there was not nearly the same amount of exposure of knowledge across the country. I mean, for some reason, London 2012, and I think the partnership that they had with Channel 4 in the UK made it that the entire country was completely, into the Paralympics. And I arrived in London, and there were the Team GB Paralympians. There were, photos of them on wraps on buildings. Like, I thought, wow, I would have liked to be on the side of a building in Vancouver a year and a half ago, So because I was Canadian competing in Canada, not to say that Canada didn't do a great job, and we're a vast, vast country, so it's very different. But it wasn't just my personal experience of London. Everybody talks about London as the best summer Paralympic Games ever, and that Paris will be the first games to perhaps even exceed London. And so there's a lot of excitement about how that might be the next stepping stone. So there are the Paralympic Games on one hand, and that world. And then there's, I think, life as a disabled person on the other hand as well, which is totally different. It's just my regular life. And that's still full of challenges. And almost 2 years ago, anyway, there's a whole story about a spine surgery that I had to have recently. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to happen on that end.
In terms of the surgery itself, or the recovery, or the impact it has on? Well,
I wasn't able. I had just moved back to Quebec from Ontario, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the Canadian healthcare system, it's run by the provinces and territories. So I switched my healthcare to Quebec, and 6 months after moving here, exactly 3 years ago, I had I did like a faux mouvement, I just moved in a funny way and ended up with a huge spine injury. I didn't have a family doctor. It was COVID. So I thought, no. And I was an athlete. So I was like, it's okay. I can deal with this pain. It's fine. And I'll just do physio, and I'll, take painkillers. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And it was really, really terrible. And I wasn't able to access the healthcare system because it was COVID, because I didn't have, a family doctor, and I even tried going to walk-in clinics. Anyway, it's a very long story. But in the end, I had to start looking outside of Quebec and then outside of Canada to have a surgery that I really needed to have on my spine. And I ended up going to Austria. to have this major spine surgery. So it was a spinal fusion and a scoliosis surgery. I didn't have scoliosis before, but what had happened, my disc had moved out of place and the vertebrae had compressed on each other and they were grinding on each other and causing scoliosis. So all this to say, it was a recent, this July, this Canada Day will be 2 years since my surgery. And that really changed my view on what it's like to be a person with a disability, because I would go to the doctor, I'm educated, I'm articulate, I know my body, I was an athlete, and I would explain what I thought it was, which is exactly what it was. And nobody took me seriously. And it never occurred to me that many of these doctors just saw me. I was using a cane at the time. I couldn't really walk at all. The only way I could get around was cycling, even in the dead of winter. And I would walk in, with a cane in extreme pain. But they couldn't see my symptoms because I have cerebral palsy. So they just assumed that this way of moving was normal. And I would explain, this is not normal. I've never used a cane. I'm in extreme pain. But I was never, if I had been able-bodied walking like that, they'd immediately know, oh, something is wrong. And so I felt like I wasn't being heard at all. And I was being completely dismissed. And then too, I wondered about, at the time, the doctors I saw were all men and they were also very dismissive. And I wondered about, is it because I'm a woman? There are all these things that come into play. But I have yet to and I won't do it here on your podcast, I promise. I have yet to unpack the full meaning of what it was to go through that, which was the worst injury I've ever had. The highest, I was an athlete and I had a high pain threshold. I have a high pain threshold. And I think that was partly what did me in, is I thought I can live like this and with this pain. But in the end, it got so bad, I just couldn't. And so that's why in the end, I had to look elsewhere and go overseas and pay for a surgery that I should have been able to get in Quebec as a taxpayer and as a Canadian. And then other people were like, yeah, and as a Paralympian who won 8 medals for Canada. And that, of course, never even occurred to me. But the reason I mention this is that it has fundamentally changed. I never really ran up against that. I'm not what you call a severely disabled person. I'm very independent. I can do everything. So I've never felt that I really needed access to the healthcare system until I injured my spine. And then it was like, there was nothing. And the whole time I kept thinking, there are people who are more disabled than me. There are people who are worse off than me and I was having so many problems trying to access healthcare. And then, through GoFundMe and help from friends and family, I was able to go have this surgery. Yeah, but I had to. It was. Did
you felt something interesting that you mentioned is basically because of your disability, you are saying that it was difficult for the doctors here to see the symptoms or to see exactly what you had, right? Do you feel like there is a lack of understanding of medical education in terms of understanding the different type of diseases, of problems that may occur in the context of someone with a disability? Because I feel like what we are teaching in medical school is mostly for individuals, body enabled, and basically that is not always in the context of someone who has a disability in addition. Do you feel like it's a...
Well, I can't say for sure. It would be really unfair of me, I think, to go from there, because I've since met, I did end up meeting a radiologist here who said, finally, who said, you need surgery right away. And I said, I know, I've been trying to get it for 1.5 years. And she did a CT scan and she could see it and she confirmed what I thought.
And it didn't accelerate any particular procedure?
Well, so then I was supposed to see a surgeon here. She was going to help me get an appointment earlier. I did meet him, and he said, absolutely, you need surgery right away. And the level of pain you have, he's like, I understand, it's crazy. And I said, okay, great. So can I had watered my plants. I don't have any pets. And I was like, I was wearing sweatpants. I was like, okay, ready. I'm ready to have surgery right now. And he was like, no, that doesn't happen like this. And I said, please. And I said, well, how long will I have to wait? And he said 4 to 7 months. And I was already literally at the end of my rope. And that day I was like, no, I can't, I won't. It wasn't that I won't wait that long. It was like, without saying it overtly, or maybe I should say it overtly, I knew that I couldn't live that much longer in that level of pain. And I'd never been suicidal before in my life, but the whole time I had that injury, I was in such extreme pain that I was fully suicidal. So I think it's important it is important to say that, because there's a whole mental health component, and I shouldn't, add to the societal stigma there. So I'm not embarrassed at all to say that, because the circumstances and the level of pain drove me to feeling that way. And it makes total sense. So in terms of medical school and doctors and so on, it's difficult because some of the doctors I did end up seeing were in walk-in clinics, so they're general practitioners. So maybe they, it's a lot to ask of them to know everything. But I do feel that I was absolutely able to clearly express what was happening with my body, what my disability is, and how that affects me normally versus what I was going through at the time. And I was really dismissed.
Where was the Canadian Athletic Organization at this time? Because again, as you mentioned, right, you have been an athlete for so many years. You have been representing Canada for so long. We're going to go through your journey, right? And most of your career has been inside the Canadian athletic organizations, right? So either no support or doctors or programs for retired athletes. I feel like you were by yourself,
I was by myself,
which is very strange.
Well, it is and it isn't. It didn't, like I mentioned, it didn't even occur to me to think, oh, well, I'm a former Paralympian and I should look to the sports system. So the Canadian sports system, I know it inside out and backwards. It's complicated, mostly because Canada is complicated because it's a federation made up of provinces and territories. And so different things this is boring, but it actually impacts everything in Canada, things fall under federal jurisdiction or provincial and territorial jurisdiction, like healthcare and education. And then
it's probably the same in the US.
Yes. And the sports system has kind of evolved as a function of Canada. So maybe I should kind of explain it a little bit so that when I talk about different organizations, it makes sense. Essentially, there's the federal government. They have Sport Canada, which is like they're in charge of all the public funding to all the sports in Canada. And then every sport has its own national sport organization. So like me, I was an alpine skier, so I fell under Alpine Canada. So I was an athlete with Alpine Canada my entire career. Every year you get named to the team and you sign a contract, and there are all these rules and things you're supposed to do and so on. And then when you go to the Olympics or the Paralympics, for that period of time alone, you belong, in quotation marks, to the Canadian Olympic Committee or the Canadian Paralympic Committee. They're separate. They're not, and different countries in the United States, it's together. It's the USOPC. So it's the United States Olympic and Paralympic USOPC Committee, USOPC in the States. And I think in France, they're a little bit more integrated. Every country is organized differently. But in Canada, the Canadian Olympic Committee, the COC, and the Canadian Paralympic Committee, CPC, are separate organizations. They work together on certain things. But yeah, it's the funny thing about all of this that I didn't even say is I was, at the time of my injury, I was an employee of the Canadian Olympic Committee here in Montreal, and they have a team coach, a team doctor, Team Canada head doctor. It never even occurred to me to and now I feel silly, but it just didn't occur to me that I could approach him with this. I probably should have, or it should have occurred to me that the Canadian Paralympic Committee has a head doctor as well. And yes, I feel really idiotic sitting here now, but at the, it was a number of things. It was the pain, the still working full time, I was trying to access things the way you're supposed to. Like, I'm just not the kind of person who thinks, oh, well, I'm special and I'm going to go above everybody else. And also, when I did go to those walk-in clinics, those doctors gave me insane amounts of drugs. And just incredible amounts of drugs. And they're like, here, just take these medications and, it'll help with your pain. And it really didn't. But what it did do is it made me really sleepy, made me really tired, made me quite confused.
Depressed.
Yeah, probably also. And I think it's hard for me to say now whether it was the pain or the medications or a combination of both. But certainly I wasn't, it wasn't the best I wasn't thinking straight all the time.
But it's a little bit what bothers me. It's like, in my opinion, right? And you mentioned it, when you are professional athletes, it's guaranteed that you're going to hurt yourself at some point.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Especially in a sport like ski racing.
Exactly. Right. So I feel like it should have been a no-brainer for you. It should have been something that would have been repeated to you over all your career to say, okay, one of the perks of being a professional athlete is we're going to take care of you and you are going to have medical support and assistance through all your life.
I wish.
I mean, because it's the problem, right? You may be 20 years old, hurt yourself for the next 5, 6, 10 years. You may not feel like anything special, but this injury will have a heavy impact to you later in your life, right? But then you are by yourself and you are not a person of interest anymore. So this is why I feel like with the representation and the risk that you are taking, it should be one of the default perks, right?
I totally agree. You're not the first person. I mean, I agree. It would be wonderful. It would, and it's how it should be.
It should be mandatory.
It should be. However, and if I hadn't worked in the Canadian, I've worked at Sport Canada, I've worked at the Canadian Olympic Committee, and if I didn't know so much about the Canadian sports system, I'd be like, yeah, that's how it should. And I'd be like, it should be like that. It should be. And it's not. And I don't know how it is in other countries. It should be. And that would be wonderful. And even, the thing is, even when it made me think of, so I had kind of 2 careers on the ski team. I started out, I'm going to talk in 4-year cycles because that's how we think, because it's Olympic and Paralympic cycles. And I will say too, it's funny, people have a difficult time, and even I do. Those of us who are Olympians and Paralympians, we are considered amateur athletes, but people think amateur is the word, like you're such an amateur. The normal connotation of that word is that you don't know what you're doing. And you're only professional when you play for like the NHL or those things and you make a lot of money. So just to clarify, I was actually an amateur athlete, not a professional athlete, but yes, but people say professional because it's what I did for my life. So it's appreciated because I know it's a compliment. But technically, those of us in the time that we are at the Olympics and Paralympics, we are amateur athletes.
Because you are not paid on a per season basis.
Yeah, we're not paid.
Yeah. You have to pay to have your certification and your licenses, I believe.
I had to pay to be on the national team. Yes, I did. Every season I had to
pay for your equipment, or maybe sponsors are helping.
Different. Yes, exactly. So in skiing, I can't speak to other sports and it's very complicated. But I can say again to your first question of how far have we come, when I was going to my first World Championships in 1996 in Austria, I was a McGill student here in Montreal. And I remember sitting on my futon in my apartment, not far from here, and calling up every single ski company and ski rep in Quebec and Canada to try to get somebody to sponsor me. because I'm going to the World Championships. And that was actually that. I don't like to think about it because many of them were very rude, and they were like, "Who are you? We don't know who you are. Are you in the Special Olympics?" And I was like, "No, I'm in the Paralympics," or I hadn't been to the Paralympics yet, but no, I'm a Para-Alpine skier. And every single one of those ski reps, all of whom were men, were quite, it was hard for me to pick up the phone and keep trying until literally, I have to say, there was one guy with one ski brand, Atomic, which is a great ski brand. And Herman Meyer was like, Atomic was the biggest brand of the late 90s for sure. And this guy, Dave Armstrong, Army, because I had also sent out kind of my skiing CV and videos. Like I'd sent them all this stuff, and then I was calling to follow up to say, I wasn't just cold calling saying, "Hi, it's Karolina, will you give me skis?" So they had received all the information, and he was incredible. He was like, "Absolutely, we will sponsor you. We'll give you skis to go to the World Championships." And so again, at that time, I was responsible for promoting myself, for finding a ski sponsor, for all this, because at that time, the Canadian, what were we called then? The Canadian Disabled Ski Team. We weren't part of Alpine Canada yet. Anyway, doesn't matter. The point is, with skiing, I did get the equipment, but every season when you got your contract, you'd had to pay like a team fee to be on the team. Sorry, I'm kind of going off.
No. I was looking at my notes because I've seen that you have been the senior program officer for Sport Canada High Performance and Partnerships, right?
Yes, that's right.
So there is a partnership department.
Well, it's called partnerships, but I don't. It really was more about high performance. So we were the little team, and I had a manager to whom I reported. We were just a small team, but what we would do is we would really be looking at Canadian results leading into Olympic and Paralympic games, and just historical results, and trying to figure out. So we would go to the games. That's why I was in London, and be on the ground so that we could gather all the data of how Canadian athletes are doing and how other countries are doing, to try to understand where we fit at that time, but also try our best to meet with our international counterparts, to talk to them and understand how their sports systems work. And it's a very different thing often between how a country will run their Olympic program and their Paralympic program, if they even have one, or how well developed it is, and so on. So to try to get that sort of information. So it was mostly the high performance piece was mostly about, because Sport Canada kind of covers sport from beginning to end. So we were the end, the podium bit, whereas Sport Canada is responsible really for the whole, as they say, from playground to podium kind of thing. Yeah.
So, I already have thousands of questions.
It's okay.
No, it's perfect.
We're going to be here all day.
No, but I think between your point around, so on the medical side, on the partnership and sponsor side, right? Sports are a very complex ecosystem, yes, right? Where there is a lot of different actors, a lot of different components. So we talked about two already, right? The medical sides, the sponsorship and the revenue side of things, / equipment. There is also everything related to transportation, hotels, because you need also to move around, right? There is psychological support, coaches. You need to have maybe visas. So there's a lot of things that are around an athlete, a professional. And I'm going to continue.
Yes, that's fine. You can just say high performance athlete. That's what we say. We say high performance athlete.
So as a high performance athlete, there's so many things that you need to keep in mind while trying to focus just on your performance and your sport, right? And I feel like it's require all organization to support athletes for that. And I feel like you have been by yourself quite a lot. Is it specific to the Paralympics groups? Do you feel like the non-disabled Olympics committee has more resources, more support, is taken more seriously? You felt like there was this unbalance between the two?
Excuse me.
No problem.
It's a great question. I don't want to misrepresent things. So you raised some great things that athletes have to be thinking of. Travel, accommodation, drug testing, doping, medical care, all sorts of sports psychology, so important, critical, I think. So many of those things are taken care of by your national sport organization. So when I am named to the national team, I have access to, so there are national team coaches. So I'm on the national team and I train and travel and compete with the national team. So I have coaches, my hotels, my travel, everything is taken care of, which is wonderful. And I don't know how I would have done it otherwise. It's great. So that support comes from your sport, your national sport organization. So if you're a swimmer, it comes from Swim Canada, Tennis Canada, so on. And it used to be when I started that Paralympic, well, it's hard to, I keep saying Paralympic, but sometimes it's a person who's never competed in the Paralympics, but a disabled athlete and it used to be divided. So when I started, we were not part of Alpine Canada. We were part of the Canadian Association for Disabled Skiing, and they ran the national team. Because they keep changing the name, but let's say the Para-Alpine ski team. And so they ran us. We had coaches, we had training camps, but it was really, really minimal. And that was the time when I was calling up all the ski reps trying to find, ski rep. And we had the only staff we had, which is astonishing. We had a head coach and assistant coach. That's it. We had no ski technicians. So that's also in skiing is super important. We had no ski technicians, no physiotherapists, no massage therapists, no sports psychologists, no nutritionists, nothing. Like we had 2 men and a whole group of people with all sorts of disabilities traveling around the world on a bus, which was great. In some way, it was great because I think back to that team and we were all really close and we really supported each other. It was just there was no need for team building because it was like, okay, we have a bunch of people in wheelchairs who can't get up on the van and start helping with gates and things. And the girls, there were only 2 or 3 of us. We weren't that strong either. So, my visually impaired teammate, Chris, and my arm amputee teammate, Ian, and a handful of others, they were always, up there. They were strong, big guys. And the guides for the visually impaired skiers, the able-bodied men, were up there and, helping the coaches get all the gates and get all the skis. And everybody always helped each other. And it was just natural. It wasn't like anybody had to say, well, can you, and we all did what we could. So, whether that was at an award ceremony and you had to make sure you had you're holding the right ski because you're hoping to get sponsored or you're, whatever. It feels like a long time ago and it was hard, but all I could think when I went to those first World Championships in 1996 in Austria, and this is directly from my father, I just kept thinking, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky. I cannot believe that I'm here. I can't believe I'm representing Canada. And I was they had the Paralympics in Lillehammer, Norway, not long before. And back then, the Paralympic team only got uniforms every 4 years. And because I hadn't been in Lillehammer, I went to the World Championships in Lech, Austria, which is a very fancy place. Beautiful. With no uniform. I'm representing Canada. I had no uniform. I was wearing my father's hand-me-down ski jacket that was way too big for me and other stuff that I had. And they were able to give me a downhill suit, which is what you compete in, which is the most important thing. So when I was racing, it said Canada. But I remember being in the start area with the Canadian team, everybody in their uniforms, and this kid, this other racer from Colombia. No, sorry, he wasn't from Colombia. I don't know where he was from. No, maybe I can't remember where he was from. But anyway, no, Kazakhstan, actually. Now I remember. Sorry. He came up to me and said, well, what country are you from? Because I just had my dad's jacket. It didn't say anything on it. And for that moment, and people don't believe me when I tell this story. They think that's not possible, but it happened. I was so embarrassed. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to be like, yeah, I'm from Canada, a wealthy and developed nation compared to Kazakhstan, but I don't have a uniform. So I was embarrassed. And then on top of everything else, I won the Super G. So I became world champion and I didn't have a uniform. So then I had to go on the podium. So I went to see my coach and I said, well, Gary, I don't have a uniform. And he was an amazing first national team coach to have. He was an amazing guy, but very relaxed guy from Roslyn, BC. He had been on the national able-bodied team in the Crazy Canuck era, just before the Crazy Canuck era. And he says, well, you're going to have to go talk to your roommate, because there were only two girls, and my roommate and best friend, still one of my best friends. You'll have to go talk to Mona and borrow her uniform. And so I had to go see my roommate, Mona, who's my best friend, whom I'd beat. And she was really upset and she hadn't skied as well as she'd hoped. Plus she was smaller than me. And I was like, I need to borrow your uniform to go on the podium. So she was kind enough to lend me her uniform. And, I went on the podium with it. But those are things that really happened in my lifetime. And I'm not 100 yet. So, I'm not that old.
So earlier you mentioned that you have seen during the UK Paralympics that the media presence, the visibility of the Paralympics games was way higher than most of the previous Paralympic games, right? Either a strong correlation between the mediatic presence, maybe the revenue generated by this presence, and the investment that is provided to the athletes. Do you see that the more visible the games are, the more resources will be injected into supporting?
I think so. I don't know. I'm almost certain that yes, because interestingly, so there I was with Sport Canada, with my job in London. That was a fabulous experience for me, just seeing my first summer games. I'd never been to a summer games, but also just to see how London and how the UK organized everything. And it was interesting to me too, because I had two skiing careers. I had the first, and then I crashed and got a concussion in 2003 and retired. And then in the meantime, I moved to the UK and did my master's degree in the UK. So I had friends in the UK who had known me when we were doing our master's together. And I'd already, at that point, had competed at 2 Paralympic Games, and I'd won 6 Paralympic medals. But they'd never even heard. I remember, I was living in Oxford and I was talking to my friends, and no one had really heard of the Paralympics. I was the first Paralympian they'd ever met. Wasn't that big a deal because we were doing our studies. But soon and then I made a comeback because Vancouver got the 2010 Games. And then a year and a half later, it's London 2012. And I went to a couple of the events with my friend Sarah from Oxford. We had studied together. And it was so funny to hear her talk, because she said, when we met, I thought it was so cool what you had done and it was amazing. But honestly, I'd never heard. And she was just like your average. Well, she went to Oxford, so she wasn't so average, but your average UK citizen. She said, I'd never really heard of the Paralympics. She's like, but then when we got 2012, she's like, it's been incredible. She's like, and I, I'm just even more proud of you and of all you've accomplished. And now I realize what a big deal it is. And we I remember going to the main stadium to watch athletics with her and her husband, and Team GB was doing very, very well. And it was super exciting. And she and her husband were just so emotional to be there with me, because they suddenly were like, oh my God, you really you accomplished a great thing. And I said, well, yeah, I get, but even for them, they had to be there. We had to be in that full stadium in London that was going crazy for Team GB. You know, I think for it to kind of hit home. So it's interesting. But I do think there is a connection, because from what I understand, because I do have lots of friends in the UK, those athletes who did really well in London 2012, or who were the broadcasters with Channel 4, they are household names in the UK, and they are like, it really did something to bring disabled people right into people's living rooms as presenters, as athletes, and in all sorts of capacities. And that hasn't really happened in Canada. I mean, I can think of a handful who work at Radio-Canada specifically, and maybe, but it's not the same quite yet. But yeah, absolutely. For those athletes from that period, not only that, then I went to Sochi, the Sochi Games, again with Sport Canada, so Winter Games, more my thing. And I happened to be traveling alone, so I had a long day of travel, and I was in the Moscow airport waiting for many hours for my flight to Sochi. And and you have to think, I'd been involved in Winter Paralympic sport for so long. I know everybody. So I'm there in the Moscow airport trying to stay awake. And I see this whole, but it's late in the game. Like it's too late for athletes to be traveling to Sochi. They're already there. But I see this whole contingent of very fit men, and they're all wearing the same kind of uniform. But I don't know them, and they're going to be on my flight to Sochi. And so typical me, I have like, I go right, and I hear that they're speaking English. So I go right up to them and I'm like, well, hi, I'm Karolina from Canada. And who are you? Like, who are you? And you're obviously going to Sochi. Like, I was a Winter Paralympian. Who are you guys? Turns out this whole group of guys were ex-military for the UK who'd been injured in combat. And as a legacy of London 2012, they had established this program, and I've now forgotten the name of it, but this amazing program where any athlete, it all just happened to be men, but it could be women as well, could go and observe the Paralympic Games. And they got the red carpet treatment, because I was there with work and I had access to areas that I hadn't as an athlete. So I kept running into them, and I kept saying, you guys have, and it was interesting. I was the only Paralympian that was giving them the real deal. I was like, it's not going to be like this when you're an athlete. You won't have access to this lounge with the delicious food. You have access to the dining hall in the village. It's a different thing, which is excellent, but it's not the same. Because they thought, anyway, it was a very interesting experience to kind of hang out with this whole crew from the UK. And obviously, the UK did something great. They established this legacy program, and these guys, got to observe Winter Games. I think a number of them, if I'm not mistaken, may have gone on to compete in the Invictus Games, which are specific for military athletes who are injured in the military. So yeah, it's really interesting. Every country that hosts ends up with different legacies. I know that, for instance, some of the alpine skiers from Russia did really, really well in Sochi. And from what I understand, if you got a medal or if you got gold, I think you got an apartment in Moscow, a car, you're set for life. So it's really interesting. As
an outsider, okay. As an outsider, I feel like indeed over the past maybe 5 to 10 years, I've seen more and more exposure and visibility towards the different competitions for disabled athletes, right? So I feel like there is a trend indeed that goes into the right direction towards promoting, giving visibility, and trying to encourage younger generation to also care about those, right? I think it's almost and maybe it's completely different, but I feel like I heard similar stories, similar comparisons when we're talking about women versus men sports, right? And quite often we hear that, yes, women athletes, like in football, basketball, or other team sports games, have lower salaries, have less support, have less recognitions. And sometimes we correlate that with the media exposure and the interest from the society, right? So the more interest people have into a sport, the more commercials and revenue you can get out of the mediatization of those games, and then you can inject that into the rest, right? So it's, even though we are talking about sport, it's still a very capitalistic environment, right? Where
everything, unfortunately,
is. But it's not a very social or socialism type of setup where basically the money coming from the able athletes can be reused to support the disabled athletes, right? It's not this circular.
No, not at all. I mean, I don't know exactly because I have not worked at a national sport organization, but I believe my understanding is, they'll have a budget for the Olympic side and the Paralympic side. They'll have a budget for the men's and the women's, but you're bringing up, I'm not fully awake this morning, so I apologize, but you're bringing up all the right points and great points and questions. If I were just a bit more awake, I'd be, but absolutely. I often think of it because I'm also a woman. Women's sport in Canada on the professional side too, they're making major gains right now, especially in soccer, in basketball. I mean, I think it was just 2 days ago, Toronto got the WNBA team. And I'm not an expert in all those things, but absolutely, it's true. I think it's super interesting. This was long ago, my first go round with the national team. I remember there used to be posters for nationals, and I was young and I was thought, I'm never going to be on the poster. And the reason I was never on the poster is because when I'm on skis or just sitting here, you can't tell that I have a disability and I have all my body parts. So if you take a picture of me, this is a terrible joke, but it's true. If you take a picture of me skiing, I look like an able-bodied person. So you can't put me on a disabled poster. I don't have what you call on skis a visible disability. Walking down the street, I absolutely do. And so all of my lovely teammates who are amputees and so on always got to be the star on the poster, which is absolutely fine. But it just made me laugh in terms of exposure, because if you put me on a poster, you wouldn't know. But it's so true. I think women's sport has actually come further than Paralympic sport. I feel this in an optimistic way. I still feel like the Paralympic movement has a long way to go, but optimistically, like you said, and it's really nice because the more I talk to people lately, the more people are aware of the Paralympics and are seeing a shift and a change. And one of what I do now for a living is I do public speaking and I give conferences, and I will often, depending on the context, I will often have a slide and I ask people, just think back to how old were you when you first remembered seeing or hearing about the Olympics? And usually it's around 5. And then I say, how old were you when you first remembered hearing about or seeing the Paralympics? And it's always a higher number. Sometimes much higher. It's like today, and today I'm 67, and that's okay. But what I've said is that it would be so great, and maybe it'll happen for your kids, that they learn about the Olympics and the Paralympics at the same time.
I have a question for you, because I was surprised to see that the Paralympic Games are happening after the Olympics Games, right? So I think it's also why there is this perception that it's two different things. That So is it because of coordination or organization reason that it need to be separated, or is it just because they don't want to dilute the focus of the interest of the Olympics games with Paralympic game?
First of all, Loris, can I just say you're my favorite interviewer because you ask all the right. I just think, wow, you've really thought about this, because I often get interviewed and the person has clearly not thought of. Your questions are right on point. So the question of whether the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games should be combined is a big one, and it's very contentious within the Paralympic community. I will say so I'm not sure where that originated, why they're separate. It used to be, though, I will say, I grew up in Calgary, and for those of you who are old enough, you might remember that Calgary hosted the 1988 Winter Olympic Games only. They weren't even paired with the Paralympics at that point. So the Paralympics happened, but they happened, I think, in Sweden. So the crazy thing is, there I am. I'm ski racing in an able-bodied club in Banff. I'm going and watching the Olympics. I'm watching, Alberto Tomba win the men's slalom. Like, I was there live in the finish area with my dad. And I had no idea that the Paralympics existed. None whatsoever. So that's interesting. So then at some point they decided, okay, they should be back to back in the same place, which is good. And then, I don't know when that happened, but they never put them together. I think back then they might have been able to early on. Now I think, as I described to you in London, I was in a packed stadium with my friends. So it's interesting because you pointed out, if they were combined, would the Paralympic athletes be overshadowed or would it be diluted? I used to think the answer was yes. And now I'm changing my tune. I'm thinking, no, I think they might actually steal the show. I used to say, yes, it would be diluted, but maybe not. I think, and I don't know for sure, but my understanding is the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, and the International Paralympic Committee, IPC, are two separate organizations. So again, it flows. That's partly why it makes sense the way it is in Canada, because the COC reports to the IOC and the CPC to the IPC. They're separate organizations. And I know for sure that the IOC, which is based in Lausanne, Switzerland, and the IPC is based in Bonn, Germany. The IOC has funds and staff in a measure exponentially larger than the IPC. And on that same trip that I did to Paris this January and to Poland, in between that, I went to Bonn for the first time because I really wanted to see the IPC headquarters. And a friend of mine actually works there, but I'd always wanted to go. And it's amazing. And all the staff were incredible and friendly and open and down to earth, but you could see it was not a massive operation. I imagine going to the IOC headquarters in Lausanne would be an entirely different story. So in some way, the same way that I talked about my early career where we were helping each other out, there's still this immense pride at what we can do with almost nothing. On the other hand, it's like, do we still have to keep struggling? Like, we already have to overcome a disability and then become great athletes. So must we do everything? There is a frustration for me personally, but at the moment, I do think that the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games now, where they have come, will forever remain separate because they're both so big, especially on the summer side. The Summer Games are huge. Both Olympic and Paralympic. In Paris, for the Paralympics, they estimate approximately 4,400 athletes from around the world. That's a huge number. And then you add the coaches and staff and chefs de mission. So it's a huge number already. And I will say, I'm completely biased, but I love the Paralympics. There's something really special about them. And I mean, other than the 1988 Olympics that I went to as a child, I've not been to an Olympic Games, so I can't say. And they were very special to me as well. But I was a spectator. I was a young kid watching, my skiing heroes. Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit in the past, right? Talking about your skiing heroes, right? And you mentioned a couple of times that your father had a good impact when you went to Austria, and also bring you to the Calgary Games. What was the role or the influence of your parents on your athletics start?
Well, they're the reason I ended up skiing. I had no choice. It wasn't me who chose skiing, not at all. So I was born in Warsaw, Poland, and it was still communist Poland at the time. And I was born very, very premature. So that's probably the reason I have my disability. And I have an older sister. She's a year older than me, Veronica, and she's able-bodied. So my parents already had, a quote unquote normal baby. So they knew they knew something was wrong with me, like right away. And they took me to so many doctors. I think my dad still has the full record all over Warsaw, trying to get a diagnosis. But cerebral palsy, you can have it in varying degrees. So medically speaking, I have mild cerebral palsy. But even as a child, and I wished I had the courage to say this to some of the doctors I would see once a year, I'd have this checkup in Calgary. And they're like, oh, but you're so mild. Meaning my cerebral palsy is so mild. And I wish I hadn't been raised so polite. And I wish I'd said, I know you think it's mild, and I know that medically it's mild. But for me, as a young girl growing up with this and being teased in school, it's not mild. It's my entire existence. And it never felt mild to me. I felt very ostracized and different. So all that to say, we then moved to Helsinki, Finland when I was 3. And
was it easy for your parents to leave Poland?
I don't think so. No, because our whole family, I don't think it was easy. We didn't even move there. We went there on a vacation or a trip. My parents are architects, so they were really into Alvar Aalto, like the Nordic design. Anyway, that was the draw. Off we went. And then my sister got sick. So we had to go to the hospital in Finland. And the doctor said, okay, I've looked at Veronica. Now I need to look at your other child. This is all, I hear this is the story my father tells me. So I don't know how it actually went down because I'm only 3 years old. And so then my father apparently said to this nice Finnish doctor, well, actually, our other child, Karolina, has a lot of things going on. Would you mind actually taking a good look at her and seeing what's going on? So incredibly, and some lovely social worker in the hospital in Finland found a pre-World War II agreement between Poland and Finland for reciprocal healthcare. And then they did a brain scan, and I've seen this brain scan of me, and they did all these tests, and they're like, oh, so that's where I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, was in Helsinki.
At 3 years old.
Yeah, 3 or 4. And then the physio, and there were a number of surgeries that I was waiting to have as well. And so they said, well, we can do those surgeries here. And, much better at the time than in communist Poland. So we ended up staying just so that I could have the surgeries and all this. And then a physiotherapist said to my parents, alpine skiing would be really great physiotherapy for Karolina, because in my case, my cerebral palsy presents in my legs and my core, my trunk, and I have my balance is terrible. So she said, alpine skiing, not Nordic skiing, which they love to do in Finland, but alpine skiing. And my father had always loved alpine skiing in the south of Poland. So he was like, yay. And so then a couple of years later, my parents, I think, were trying to figure out what to do. And they had a number of friends kind of all over the place. And my dad went and visited his different friends to see where we really want to end up. And like you, he decided on Canada, but not only that, he had visited a friend in Calgary and went skiing at Lake Louise for one day. And he tells the story. My father's a storyteller, obviously. He tells the story all the time. He's like, oh, well, I said, when did you decide? How did you decide? He said, oh, it's so simple. He said, I was at Lake Louise and I was riding the Olympic chair, which doesn't exist anymore or is still there, but doesn't run. And I looked around and saw, it's so beautiful. Lake Louise is stunning if you haven't been. And I looked around and I just said, this is where we're moving. So that's it. We moved to Calgary to be able to ski in places like Lake Louise.
So your parents literally moved to Canada to make sure that you were able to ski?
Pretty much. And I hadn't skied yet. And then...
Did you know about it at the time?
Oh, no, I had no idea. I was only 5. I had no clue. I don't think that was the only reason. I think it was one of the reasons.
They wanted to move, but it was choosing the place was, your need for this type of therapy helped finding the place.
Yes. Although now in retrospect, the medical care I received in Calgary wasn't great. The physiotherapist I got was amazing and is still a very close family friend, which is, I met her when I was 5 and then I ended up babysitting her children when I was older, they're very close family friends of ours. So it's interesting, but, so it was as soon as they could, and this is long before the internet. I don't know how my parents found out all this information and made these huge decisions. My dad found a program, a disabled skiing program run by the Canadian Association for Disabled Skiing at a little ski hill in Calgary called Pascapoo, which was later renamed Canada Olympic Park for the 88 Olympics, because that's where the ski jump is and the bobsleigh track. It's a little ski hill, but it's in the city limits. And that's where I tried to ski and I hated it. I hated it. I couldn't stand on ski. I was falling over all the time. I couldn't do it. I hated it. I really hated it. And my parents, all I wanted, not much has changed. All I wanted was hot chocolate. I was just like, can I just go inside and have a hot chocolate? So it's really my parents who, mostly my dad, because but they would take us skiing and then they put my sister in a ski racing program in the Rockies. I'm fine, thanks. And so, yeah, it was them. It was their decisions. I really didn't love skiing. It wasn't like love at first sight at all. It took a long time. But then as I grew older and I got stronger and then I had surgery on my right leg when I was about 14.
But just on that, no, it's fine. But at 5, because you started to ski around 5, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly 5.
And so how is it fine if you don't? How did your parents, father? Is it more your father, your mother, or it's really your father who pushed you into skiing? I feel like it was.
I think it was both of them, but. Because there are pictures of me holding my mom's hand and little skis and whatever. She was there. I think the drive, it was them together. I just feel like the person who was up on the mountain with me was my dad, Yeah.
So how did he supported you? How did you, was he like very severe and say, no, you need to do that and stop crying and just get up and fight? Did he try to inject in you a fighter spirit, or at the contrary, was he more supporting and trying to let you love the sport at your own pace and over time?
I'm going to say, I'm not sure, but this fighting spirit, so I had a godfather in Poland, and he knew me up, and he would see me around until the age of 3 when I still lived in Poland. So this is before I was ever on skis. And he described me to me when I was older. He said, "Oh," and this is before the age of 3. He's like, "Oh," and this is true. This is my personality. He's like, "Oh, you were so stubborn. If you fell over," which happened all the time, and somebody tried to, no, I can do it by myself. I can get up and I can keep walking and I can do this. So that kind of fighter spirit didn't come from anyone else. I think I always had it. And it's not just him who tells this story. Like people who knew me when I was little are just like, oh, no, you were always like that.
So you hated skiing, but you still wanted to be good, to prove yourself something?
No, at that young age when I was just starting, I think my parents did the right thing. I just remember, like, my dad is a goofy guy and he was just encouraging. And then we would do, like, I remember this, he said, okay, now let's pretend that you fell and we'll make it look, and put your skis everywhere and I'll take a picture. And so he tried to make it fun, but for sure, as I got older, like I think when I was starting, he just wanted to make sure that I could feel comfortable. But as I got older, for sure, like he is the one in our family who has the biggest love of skiing I've ever seen. And he's the one who drove my sister and I every weekend to training and so on. And I remember, being maybe 11, 12, 13, 14, I was skiing in an able-bodied club against able-bodied kids from other clubs. And so often, it's not like I would come first or even in the middle. I would come last or I would fall too many times. And I just remember so many races early on when my sister and I were still racing in the same league because she was good and she moved on. We'd be driving home from the mountains. My dad is driving. My sister's sitting in the passenger seat. I'm in the back and I'm crying. And both of them, were because I fell or I came last or something. And they were so encouraging and tried to make me understand. I mean, my sister was only a year older than me, but like that I'm doing great and I shouldn't compare myself to able-bodied kids. But it was so hard. But yeah, they were there. My parents and my sister were there the whole way, the whole way.
Yeah. Did you understood that it was really for your benefits to do that, or was it more like an side occupation, or did you took it like it's almost like a requirement for you to ski?
I definitely understood the physical role of skiing. And it wasn't the only sport that my parents put me in. And I had exercises that I had to do every morning and every night. And there was never any, and in the morning, I did them on my own. In the evening, I did them with my dad. And that was physiotherapy exercises that I, was supposed to do every day. And I also did horseback riding and swimming, a little bit of tennis. But I knew, I think early on, and both my parents, but probably mostly my father, made it very clear, that I have to remain physically active. I have to keep moving. I have to exercise. I have to do different sports to, I was going to say remain healthy, but it was more like to be healthy as a person with cerebral palsy. And skiing just happened to be, the sport, like the main sport for our family. And my sister was great at it. My parents loved skiing, and you're outside. It's great as a family activity, like we were in a club, but it's great as a family activity.
I love alpine skiing.
Oh, we should go skiing. And because I really don't ski anymore, you can laugh at me now.
No, I love it, and I put my kids on ski at the age of 3.
Oh, even better. Yeah, my sister started at 2 in Poland, and then I didn't start till 5.
I wanted. It's really a sport that I love, right? The outdoor aspect of it, the speeds, the feeling, and there's a rhythm to it, right? Because you go down fast and then you go up a little bit slower, right? But it's an opportunity to connect, right? Because on the run, you don't have much opportunity to have chat or discuss, right?
Yeah.
So on the way up,
depends who you're skiing with.
Yeah. But at the beginning, my daughter, so I have 9 and 6, and my 6 years old, she was again 3, 4 at the time. She was seeing her older brother like skiing quite well. And she was always falling. She was frustrated. She wanted to stop. She wanted the hot cocoa, right? And I always ask myself during those times, should I try to encourage her to to stand up and to try again, or should I try not to make this whole experience like a bad moment, and maybe she will hate skiing for life, right? Maybe I should just give her the record time to just appreciate and not necessarily have like intense sessions or anything. So it was always a question of how to approach sports and frustration with kids. I think it's always something.
Do you know what? I have flashbacks to moments where as a kid, I really hated skiing or I was really afraid. And I don't know that I would suggest this as a parent, but it's like I knew I had no choice, which is weird. Like, and sometimes I wasn't even with my parents; I was with other adults. Yeah, that's a tough one. And I don't have kids. My sister has 3 kids, and so when we're all together, I really do think about. Because that's she's my only sister. And, so I think about, not about skiing, but about just, raising kids and how do you do it and how do you encourage them in chess or sport or learning languages or whatever, right? Yeah. And what's the right way? And I'm not a parent, so I couldn't never say there's a right way or a wrong way. And things have evolved since, since I was a kid. I do think my parents tried their very best, and they did what they thought was best. And for sure, we moved to Canada because of me. My father has said that to me. So yeah, I don't know because.
And I agree with you. I think there is no right or wrong, right? And I think that it's every individual trying to find what they are the most comfortable with and trying to take into consideration the kid personality as well, right?
Exactly.
But when I was skiing at a young age as well.
Where did you ski when you were a kid?
In Alpine mountain, in a lot of different stations there. Yeah, in the Alps. And
you're so lucky.
I didn't realize how lucky I was until so I spent all my winters skiing there, but it was not a great experience for me because my parents were putting me into a ski school and they were skiing on the side.
Gotcha.
And I was struggling, and I remember myself struggling, but by myself, right? And there's this whole class, this whole surrounding, and the experience was not so pleasant at this young age because I felt trapped.
Yes.
I felt trapped on my skis because I couldn't move as much as I couldn't, and I had those big combinations, right? And I felt like, okay, I have to endure these 2, 3, 4 hour ski lesson, doing things that were very difficult for me. When you're kids, things are more complicated. Things are way more heavy in comparison to your weight and muscle, right? So when I wanted to teach ski to my kids, one of the things that I thought to myself is I will always be with them, right? And a little bit what you said with your father being with you on top of the mountain, right? I feel like it's important that I felt for me that it was important to be next to my daughter when she was falling, right? And because I didn't want necessarily my son to have only 30 minutes ski session after 45 minutes or 1 hour of preparation to come there, I was putting her between my legs and we were skiing together. Her ski was a little bit higher off the ground, so it was maybe a little bit dangerous, but she felt the speed, she felt the excitement, right? She didn't have to necessarily be good at it. She was just experiencing the movements, the flow, the dynamic, and I feel like it's really what mattered the most, right? It's trying just to make it like a family moment. And
I love it. Well, mine was a little bit different because essentially my first season on skis, I really lucked out. There was this program for disabled kids at Pascapoo, And I just moved to Canada and I didn't speak English. I only spoke Polish, Finnish, and French. So I didn't speak any English. So they had to find a ski instructor who spoke French in Calgary at the time.
How do you learn French?
In Finland. That's a whole other, yeah. We happened to be living near the French embassy school. And my mom had always been a Francophile and they were looking for more students. And so she's, please take my girls. So in the morning we went to French school and then we crossed the street and went to Finnish school. So we did both. So then when we arrived in Calgary, we spoke Polish to our parents, Finnish to each other because we'd lived in Finland. And then French, we were in a French immersion school, but I came in kindergarten. So none of the kids spoke French, only the teachers and the principal. And one girl, because her mother was from Quebec. So she was my best friend. But all this to say, I remember that first season they found, and I don't remember her name, but she was awesome, a young ski instructor from Quebec who was there. And she was my ski instructor. And I just thought she was amazing. And she was the one who like taught me everything. And I loved being with her. And then the next season she came back to Quebec, or she left. And so I didn't want to really do the program anymore. And my sister was in a ski club, Sunshine Ski Club in Banff. So I was like, that's what I want to do. But that was able-bodied kids. And I remember my parents being really nervous and being like, well, Caro, that's all able-bodied kids and it's a big mountain. And, like maybe, but I insisted because I was stubborn. And so they signed me up. And so then from, I think, 8:45 to 3 every Sunday, we'd be with in our groups in the ski team. And I struggled, like you, I struggled a ton. And I don't necessarily have a good time, but I just kept going, I guess. And then afterwards was when, like from 3 till 4:30 or whatever, when the lifts was when we skied with my dad. I still associate skiing with my family because it was like we drove an hour and 20 minutes, in the car. We packed our skis together. We over the years, we like waxed we had a wax room in our house. Really? Yes. My dad was going to have a sauna because we lived in Finland. He was going to be the sauna. And then in the end, it just turned into a wax room. And people who they were like, you use it to wax your legs? And I was like, no, to wax our skis. We had an actual wax room in our basement.
What's a wax room look like?
All you really need is a bench, like a workbench where you can, with clamps, where you can sharpen your edges and wax. Mm-hmm. So tune your edges, do the edges and put wax on the skis. So it needs to be long enough, for us to accommodate a long downhill ski. Like by the time I was on the national team, going back now to the World Championships in 1996, right before that, I crashed. And I was a student here in Montreal. I biked all year round because I thought it was good training in the snow and stuff. And I fell off my bike and I broke my thumb, or I sprained it, my right one. But it didn't. I was like, that's fine. And then I went to try out my new downhill skis, my new atomic downhill skis at Sunshine, with the broken thumb, and I caught an edge and I fell. So I sprained the other one. So I had like a broken thumb and a sprained thumb, and I couldn't really do anything. No, seriously. And so then my dad I was flying to the World Championships from Calgary. So my dad stayed up late, and he because you have to put travel wax on your skis. You have to wax them for when they travel so that they don't get damaged. So I went to bed. He travel waxed all my skis. He packed them up for me. We went to the airport. I show up in Austria. I unpack my enormous ski bag with all the different skis for all the different disciplines. And my father worked in TV at the time, and he had, there used to be that, like, I don't remember their names, those movie guys. And it was like 1 thumb up, 2 thumbs up. Like for movies, if a movie was really good, it got 2 thumbs up. He had taken all these 2 thumbs up stickers because I had one, and he stuck them on all of my skis. And I was so mad because it was like my first big international competition and my brand new atomics. And he had stuck 2 thumbs up stickers on all of my skis. I was so embarrassed. And the way he tells us, I called him furious from, how dare you put this? But now I'm like, oh, it was, he wanted me to do well, and he had packed my skis, and like, of course it was, but yeah, so he was kind of there. Yeah. But I don't remember calling him being angry, but he tells me that I called him and I was really mad.
When did you realize that you could start doing such competition? What was the transition from doing ski with your family as a form of therapy, but also by love at the time? As a teenager, I believe that it was more pleasant to say, oh, maybe I can compete. Maybe I can do something more than just doing it by leisure.
Another good question. Well, so as I mentioned, I ended up being in an able-bodied ski club, race club with my sister. So I actually grew up like a ski racer, like an able-bodied ski racer in Canada. So I was, learning to be a ski racer. I wasn't that great in the beginning.
But with the ambition to...
No, because I was disabled. So I didn't have any... I had ambition to get better and ski well, but I wasn't thinking that I was going to go to the Olympics. No. But, and then I started to love skiing, and I had a whole group of friends, and I was getting better. Like, I was beating able-bodied kids, and I was like, this is cool. Like, I was getting good. And then what happens at that time, I don't know if it's still the same, at a certain point around 18, when you hit 18 or so in skiing, if you're not on a provincial team or a national development team or really on your way, then unfortunately there's not much left for you to do. So my sister and most other racers in our club, they become coaches, or, so it's kind of sad. And this is the one time I can think of in my life that it was an advantage to have a disability, because my sister, who was a fabulous ski racer, she was really good, and like, she took risks and she wasn't afraid, and she was really flexible, and she just had no fear. She would just charge. Like, skiing wise, we had very different personalities. I was far more cautious than her. But she just was like, and she'd always have these spectacular crashes, and everyone thought she was dead. And I'm fine. Like, it was crazy, but she had a lot of talent, and she was just very athletic and all this. But, then my parents, although skiing was important, our educations were always number one. So skiing or any other sport could never take over from getting a good education and getting good grades. So it was never that they were, and plus they weren't wealthy. So to put us in a skiing academy or something like that, we didn't have the means to do that. Like I mentioned, I went to the World Championships with a hand-me-down jacket of my father's. Like, everything in our family was hand-me-down. Everybody, we were sharing all of our skis, and everything was shared. And that wasn't common in skiing in Banff. Like, most of the people and kids that we raced with, they were wealthy, and they had all the new skis and all the new everything. But all this to say, so, there is my sister kind of just before university, or in university, she's coaching and doing that and skiing with the university and having fun. And just at that time was when I was really, like the end of high school, I was really, really beginning to get good and really love skiing. So it took a long time. And my dad kept saying, well, why don't you, because why don't you try training with the disabled team? And I really didn't want to. And it blows my mind to think that I didn't think of myself as disabled, really. Which is funny, because it's not that I didn't, but I just was like, oh, I'm just me, and I just ski. And I really wanted to be with my friends. Finally, though, one year, my father convinced me, and it was perfect timing, I have to say. So I went back to Pascapoo, which was now called COP, Canada Olympic Park, where the Alberta disabled ski team was training. And that year, the coach, I was so lucky that it was at this time, he himself was a person with a disability. He was an arm amputee, a man named Danny Latane, an amazing, wonderful human, an amazing skier. And he had been on the national team, and he was coaching the Alberta team. And on that team were two other people who, I was 17 and they were 14. Mona, who is one of my best friends still, and Ian, both of whom were arm amputees, both of whom grew up racing in an able-bodied club, just like me. And I watched them ski gates, and I was like, those two can ski. Those two are racers. I thought that disabled skiing was going to be like this pathetic thing. I'm just being honest, and I didn't want to do it. And I was like, I'm a ski racer. I want to be a ski racer. Like, I want to be a high performance at that point. It didn't start when I was 5, but by that point I was like, no, it's got to be the real. And I saw Mona and Ian do gates, and I was like, oh, they're really good. Okay. They know what they're doing. They're ski racers.
Yes. And I think that it's interesting what you are saying, because it's maybe one of the first understanding or perception that people may have, right? That because it's Paralympics, because it's disabled athletes, they don't have the same talent or capacity or performances that able athletes, right? And I think that's completely wrong, right? And I think that's something that you can see that the shape, the training, the focus is equally important, and the high performance disabled athletes is probably way better than 95% of the able population.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's very true. And it just goes to show that even as, I was only 17, but I had my own préjugés, like my own prejudices, if you will, or my own notions of, but it's because I remembered clearly when I started when I was 5, and the disabled kids who were around me then, and they weren't, and that was just to learn to ski program. But I was really marked by that. And I remember thinking, they weren't athletic. They I don't know. I just remember thinking I wasn't like them either. So even at 5, because I'm mildly disabled, right? Supposedly, I didn't quite fit in anywhere. I didn't fit in the able-bodied world. I didn't fit in with this group of severely disabled children. Whom my first exposure was at 5 years old. I'd never met other severely disabled kids, and I wasn't severely disabled. And I felt like, oh, I'm different from them again. I felt more like my sister and my able-bodied friends. And that's just as a child. It was just this natural feeling of like, it's just very human nature to like, who am I more alike?
Where do I fit?
Where do I fit?
What's my community?
Yeah. And then I remember I have the image in my mind right now of Ian and Mona doing gates. And I was like, oh, they're good. And I want to ski with them. And so that was the beginning. And then that year, so that's 1994, they took me to nationals. So yeah, I made the Alberta team. I skied a bit. They saw me ski. They're like, okay, you can be on our team. I went to nationals. And it was an interesting thing because nationals were in Newfoundland, and the national team was going straight from Newfoundland to the Paralympics in Lillehammer. And like their flight was literally, from Newfoundland to Lillehammer. And I was there, and I won every single race. I beat everyone on the national team. And I was so upset because then now I knew what the Paralympics were. And I was like, what? I don't get to go? Because of course they didn't know that I existed. And then I just showed up and I won everything. And so from that moment on, that was the moment where I was like, oh yeah, when are the next Paralympics? Where are they? This is my life purpose. And that's when it began. I was like, the next ones are Nagano 1998. I'm going to make the national team, and I'm going to go to Nagano. And that was the beginning. Finally, it took me like 2 hours to get to that. Sorry.
No. So how do you change your training program from being like in a local school, from training with the provincial team, to trying to get ready for the next Paralympics?
So what ended up happening, part of it is what I changed, but a lot of it is just how, well, there is no system, but how things are set up at the time. So I always say, and I still stick to this, my years of training in an able-bodied club to be a ski racer, as much as it was really difficult for me, was the best foundation I could have asked for, because I learned to be a ski racer, and I learned all the disciplines, and mostly when I think back to those times, it was really mostly, especially when I was 10, like younger, it was really hard. And because I wasn't always physically at the same level as people my own age as well. So then there's the aspect of I'm skiing with kids who are younger. There were many things that I found really difficult, but that was the perfect foundation because I knew how to ski. I knew how to race. Those things don't change. Like whether I'm racing an able-bodied person or a disabled person, a giant slalom course is the same. Everything is the same. And it's about how fast I can get down, right? So nothing actually changes in the sense of if I had the skills and I learned how to be a ski racer. So I learned those things from age 6 to whatever, 18, let's say. So I had the perfect foundation, which is why I could go to Canadian nationals and win everything without thinking about and racing disabled. I'd never raced disabled people. And I'm at my first nationals and it was like, yep, okay, it's a race. I know what to do. Boom. Right. So I didn't really have to change much. What happens then at that time, it worked in the way that at nationals, the national team coaches would be watching everybody and trying to see who they would invite to next year's national team training camp. And I was a silly person. I'm still like this. Even though I won everything and I skied really well, I was so nervous. And I was like, I don't know if they'll invite me to the camp and am I good enough? So silly. And I was a McGill student. I remember my first year. And I got the call from the national team coach, Gary, the same one who later told me to go borrow Mona's uniform. He called me to say to invite me to the camp. So then I did the camp and we trained with the national team. And this was in BC. And I did I was so nervous and I did everything, perfectly. And I was trying so hard because I had to make the national team. And I was waiting and waiting for them to call me. And then he called me. I was in my kitchen in Saint-Henri. And, he called me to say I made the team. And I was like, really? And he's like, Caro, he's like, you didn't actually think you wouldn't make the team. I'm like, I don't know until I really didn't believe it was going to happen until it did, even though objectively, I'd won nationals. I'd beat the whole national team. I was young. I was in shape. I knew how to race. I did the training camp. I was totally fine. But, didn't believe because it wasn't even in my imagination. It wasn't something, it just happened kind of. I say that, but I did all these things that happened before led me to that, but I didn't, it just happened. And it happened at the same time that I was starting university here in Montreal. So then I had to adjust. I adjusted my entire university career for skiing. So then I would take semesters off and I was, skiing more than I was studying.
Did you found good hills around Montreal? Because it's not Calgary nor Banff, right?
That was a real struggle for me, actually, because I joined the McGill ski team to try to train with them, but that wasn't necessarily a good match either. So I did train with them. Academically was challenging. What I found was most helpful was I would take whole semesters off and I would just move back out west because I felt comfortable there. I knew more people. I knew the skiing community there, so I could go. Because in skiing, the thing is, you need a coach. You need somebody to talk to the hill, to get hill space for you, to be able to set gates. You can't just train on your own all the time. One of my teammates, Stacy, who's a paraplegic, lived in Banff, so we would ski together a lot. But it was still hard, because we were adults. Yes. And he's a paraplegic, so he's in a sit ski. So again, he's visibly disabled. So all the kids in Banff thought he was super cool. And then I'd show up and they'd be like, you're just an adult who skis. There's nothing cool about you. Because they couldn't see that I was also disabled. I just was old, and I'm skiing with them. So they didn't really so that was a bit challenging. And the national team program at that time, we talked about funding. It was not as developed. They didn't have that many camps, and your training was really your responsibility. Yes. And I took it seriously, which is why I took time off of school. I would move back, and this was all on my own dime. I would either be living in Banff or Canmore, or sometimes at my parents' place in Calgary. So that wasn't easy, but there were, national team camps here and there. And that was great because we'd all come together. We would get the coaching, and then we would get on the road when the competitive season started. And that was great because, you're in Europe for a chunk of time. So you're doing races, but you're training in between. Yeah. And so it wasn't great, like compared to the program that was in place when I made my comeback for 2010, it was really, really, as they say, it was really basic. Mm. But the responsibility was with you. And I took it super seriously. I was like, I am a high performance athlete. I'm on the national team. I mean, I was at the gym. The guys at the McGill gym were just like, what is with this girl? Like I was in the gym all the time. Took it really, really seriously. Yeah. But it's hard it depends on the sport. If you're in swimming or athletics, sports where you can access what you need easily, it's a bit easier. And then with skiing, it's not just skiing. It's the season. It's the snow. So I did the best I could. And I think it was good enough. But yeah, it was still, I'm in university. I was still, I wouldn't say alone, but I was still figuring it out, getting sponsors, figuring out training on my own, very much.
So let's make a technical pause, right? In the sense that as alpine skiing is there's 4 different types of disciplines, right? And in the disabled category, there is also different classifications, right? And it's something that I learned very recently because I was before researching a little more and trying to. I was thinking that it can seem unfair, right? Because there's so much range of disabilities that. Is it fair that, a blind athlete is competing with a non-blind athlete or someone with a wheelchair? How do they organize themselves to make sure that there is a certain level of fairness? So could you explain us first the 4 different disciplines, the differences between the 4, and then the categorization of the different disabilities?
Yes, of course. Your questions are so good. You clearly have researched. Okay, so in skiing, whether able-bodied or disabled, it's all the same, as I said. There are 4 disciplines. There are 2 speed disciplines, as the name implies, the high-speed ones. Downhill, which is the fastest. So for me in downhill, I think, I wasn't always clocked. Clocked is like what they do.
And is it like straight?
No, it's not straight. That's a totally different thing. That's speed skiing and it's crazy. No, downhill is not straight.
There's gates.
Yeah, there are always gates. So I'll get to that. So I'll do the disciplines and then I'll talk about what's common among the disciplines. Okay, so the fastest and the biggest vertical distance is downhill. And that's the most dangerous and maybe speeds around 130 kilometers an hour, depending on how the gates are set and on the hill and on the snow as well, actually, most of all. But in downhill, because it is so high speed and so dangerous, you always have 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 what are called official training runs. And they're run just like the race. You have a bib, you're in they have a start order, everybody's in place. It's run just like the race so that it's for a number of reasons. It's so that you as an athlete can get a sense of the course at high speed before you actually do it and an understanding of where you personally want to be. Like my line will be different than Chris, my visually impaired colleague, who is huge. And so he carries way more speed and he's a big man. So he'll be coming into and out of corners differently than me, for example. So it's for you to know that, it's for the coaches to be able to see how everything's running, and it's for the organizers to know, okay, it's safe. Like they're not making you go and hoping anyone will fall, but just making sure it's safe and that you have proven that you can do it. So that's downhill. That's the only race discipline in which you get an official training run. So you get to run the course before the race. And all the other ones, you never get to run it until the actual race. Super G, super giant slalom, is the other speed discipline. Downhill is 1 run, the race. So you do 1 run and that's it. And you win or you lose or whatever. Super G, same thing. Speed, 1 run, no training runs. So what is common among all of the races is in ski racing, what happens is the morning of the race, a coach who had been selected the night before from name pulled from a hat. They set the course. And in the morning, everybody goes up and it's called inspection. And you have about an hour to side slip the course. So you're not in the track, you're on the side or in the track, but you're not skiing it. Everybody's on it at the same time. You're going slowly and you're looking at the gates. So where is it set? You're looking at the shape of the mountain. You're feeling the snow because every single day the snow is different. And that makes a huge difference. People don't realize what a big difference that makes. So you're gathering all this information, you memorize everything, and then you go back up and you go. So in downhill and in all of them, you always inspect every day. So in downhill, you've inspected it several times. You inspect it on the days that you have an official training run. You inspect it again and again and again. You feel the snow. You see how things have changed. Also in downhill, a track begins to develop because so many people have run the same track. And that's the fast part. And, where do you want to be? So in Super G, there are no training runs like in downhill. So you inspect and then you go. So it's like inspect and then 110, 120. It's great. Super G is great. I had a really good run in Super G for a while. I became world champion in Super G. So it was like the first one where I, really did well. Then there's giant slalom, which is the classic. It's 2 runs combined time. It's kind of the way most people, the size and shape of turn that if you go skiing, you're probably skiing a giant slalom turn, very relaxed, and it's 2 runs combined time. And then there's slalom, which is 2 runs combined time where the gates are really, really close together and they're kind of hitting you all over the body because you're trying to make very tight turns. So essentially, you have all this armor for the gates. And so those are the 4. And then on the able-bodied side, they have a discipline, which I wish they had on the disabled side. It's called, they have the combined, which is 1 run of downhill and 1 run of slalom, which is very challenging because most people they're very different skill sets. So there's the combined.
So you start very fast.
You do 1 run of downhill and 1 run of
okay.
slalom.
It's super.
You can't. You can't. Oh my God, that would be so funny. No,
like a triathlon, where you
do 1 run of downhill and then 1 run of slalom. On the Paralympic side, in 2010 in Vancouver for the first time, they had the super combined. So they did 1 run of Super G, 1 run of slalom. And as much as I said I loved Super G, by the time 2010 rolled around, I felt that I could win a combined, which is 1 run of downhill and 1 run of slalom. I actually felt that I could do that. That would have been more to my advantage, I think. Nevertheless, I did get the bronze in the super combined, but I still would think I would have liked a combined. All this to say, so there are really the 4 disciplines and then the 1 combined.
And what about and again, a lot of very stupid questions, uneducated question.
No.
But what about those, the one where the skier is almost flying, there's a ramp and
and they do acrobatics and stuff?
Not necessarily acrobatics, but they have this specific, this specific aerodynamic combinations. And they have the skis almost parallel to the body, and they try to go as fast as possible.
But are they flying in the air or are they around the whole
No, they are flying in the air.
That's ski jumping.
Yes.
And that's a completely other sport. Completely different.
So it's not considered as alpine.
No, not at all. Okay. So to explain, I'll try to explain all. It's complicated now because recently there have been more disciplines that have emerged, which is fun.
Yeah, because in my head, it's if you have skis.
No. So the biggest distinction right away, which I think most people will understand, is that there's alpine skiing. I always do alpine skiing, Nordic skiing, or cross country. So those are totally.
The rifles also.
That's biathlon.
Yes, biathlon.
Yeah. So that's a completely different sport. So that's one. And then, of course, snowboard. We all know snowboard, different thing. Okay, got that. Then within the sports where you have skis on your feet, there is ski jumping where people, I can't really do it, but like they go and they jump off the thing and then they're just in the air and they're flying and then they land. That's ski jumping, also a completely different sport. Those skis have no edges and they're really long and really fat. and their suits are made to fly. It's like a completely different sport. Then the sports where you have actual alpine skis on your feet, but you're not doing alpine skiing. All right. So we'll start with, there is a whole other sport, a national sport organization for freestyle skiing. And freestyle skiing has disciplines within it.
Acrobatics.
Well, not just.
Okay.
So freestyle has moguls, bumps. Yeah. That's one. So Alexandre Bilodeau won the gold medal in moguls for Canada at the Vancouver 2010 Games. He was the first Canadian gold medalist. So he's a big, well-known athlete here in Montreal. He's from here and also in Canada. So he won the first gold on home soil in freestyle skiing in moguls or bumps. Okay. So what they do is, I think they have 2 runs combined time, and it's all bumps with 2 jumps in the course as well. So they bump, do some air, keep going, do some air, keep going. And for them, it's timed and it's also judged. Whereas in alpine skiing, as we like to say, there's no judging in alpine skiing. It's just time, which means you don't have to look good when you do it. I mean, whatever, it's just about speed. So that's moguls. And then in freestyle, they also have aerials. So where they go off a big thing and they do all sorts of acrobatics, as you mentioned, in the air. So bloop, 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 and then they land. And then they also have, am I missing one? I feel like I'm missing one. Well, Canada does really well in bumps. Like we have Mikael Kingsbury, who is dominant. We do really well. The aerials, it's called. I wonder if I'm missing. Anyway, so that's considered a completely different sport. It's a different sport organization that's not alpine skiing, but it's,
And does those sport exist as well for disabled
No.
athletes?
So there isn't freestyle. Ski jumping, no. And the next one I was going to mention is ski cross, which just came on the Olympic program in 2010. And that's where you have about, I think, 4, 5, or 6 skiers at the top, and they exit at the same time. It's like a mass start. And then they're kind of in this kind of a course, and they're going, I think it's about 4 of them at the same time. And so they have gates that they have to make, but it's more like in a luge track, and they also get a bit of air, and that's ski cross, and ski cross is part of the Alpine Canada family. So Alpine Canada is in charge of basically able-bodied alpine, the disciplines I described, disabled alpine with para-alpine, and ski cross. But none of the only sport in those that exists at the moment on the Paralympic program is para-alpine, which is mine. So there's no ski jumping, there's no freestyle, and there's no ski cross. Maybe we'll get there someday. Yeah.
It's something that skiers are talking about.
No one's ever asked me that question. No one's ever asked me that question. The only thing I would say is that one of my teammates, well, he's also retired, Josh Dewick, he was born able-bodied and he grew up doing freestyle skiing. So, bumps and air. And how he broke his back was he was coaching and he was showing something in the air and he landed on his head and broke his back. So he came not from ski racing, but he was familiar with snow sport. That his home sport, his passion was always freestyle. But so then anyway, he joined our team. And he was actually chef de mission for the Beijing Paralympics. And I was assistant chef de mission at the last minute to him, which was great, was fun. But I didn't get to go because it was COVID. And now in his personal life, I believe, so he's from BC. I think he's the head of BC Freestyle, like able-bodied. So he's the not the CEO, but the president, whatever. He's the head of BC Freestyle, and he's a person with a disability. So that's pretty cool that there's this. So he kind of went back to his home sport. But then when we talk about Nordic, which is, cross country skiing and biathlon, that absolutely exists on the Paralympic program. And in fact, Canada has the greatest of all time ever Paralympian in Nordic in the visually impaired category. So I'll get talking about the categories in a minute. Brian McKeever, who is also a friend of mine. and he is highly decorated and an incredible athlete. And his brother, Robin, is not visually impaired, was an Olympian in Nagano in cross-country skiing. And then in 2002, Salt Lake City, Brian had just recently been diagnosed with a visual impairment, and his brother, Robin, was his guide, because a visually impaired person has a guide in front of them. Yeah, and they won a bunch of medals. I won a bunch of medals. They were amazing. It was this amazing, because I feel so close to my sister too, and she was a skier. I always thought if I became visually impaired, of course she would be my guide. And then to see Robin guiding Brian, it was. And then later on, because Robin's older than Brian, Robin was like, I'm too old. It was, Brian was so good. Brian was so good that in fact, in 2010, he was selected for both the Olympic team and the Paralympic team in Nordic skiing, because if they are racing in a pack, he could see enough to be able to do it. So he was selected to the team. He didn't get to compete. Like, he was on the roster, but that's a huge accomplishment. So he was so fast and so fit that his brother was like, I'm too old. And so he's had other guides since then. But initially in Salt Lake City, when I met them, Robin was his guide, and that was amazing. So all that to say, that program for cross-country skiing and biathlon on the Paralympic side in Canada is extremely strong, thanks to the McKeever brothers. So that exists. And there's also Para Snowboard that came on the program in Sochi. So I was there in Sochi. I saw the first, its debut in Sochi. It wasn't the depth of field. It has a lot. It's a similar thing. You're looking for. You need to get people who are disabled, who are athletic, who are interested in the sport, who are willing to give up a lot of stuff, and then have enough competitors to have a field. So that's also why, I don't think ski jumping is ever really going to make it, because a sit skier can't go off a ski jump and then land. They maybe could, but I don't know. And then going back to your question, in terms of the classifications, it's unique to the Paralympic movement. And I'll start with, skiing, which was my sport. So essentially, as in all sport, it's always men race men and women race women. That's normal, same thing. And then within that, in skiing, we had 3 categories. We had the visually impaired category, the sitting category, and the standing category. And I competed in the standing category. In the visually impaired category, as it suggests, it's all athletes with visual impairment with a guide. But regardless of your disability, in order to race in the Paralympics, you have to go through a medical exam at some point before your first international race, so that doctors can verify that you have the disability that you say you have and to put you in the right class. So in the visually impaired group, there were 3 levels of impairment and vision. So there's a B3, which is, the least blind, B2, which is quite blind, and B1, which is totally blind. When I started, there were a lot of B1s, the totally blind, they had their goggles taped, they couldn't see anything. And you could tell it was really something to watch them race and be guided. There aren't that many B1s. I don't even think that do ski racing anymore. So it's interesting how it evolves. But so there, it's just visually impaired people racing against visually impaired people. But again, in terms of fairness, it's not fair for someone who can see quite a bit, has 6 or 7% vision, which sounds like nothing, but it's a lot compared to nothing. So they have, and it's not ideal, they have a factor system. So based on statistics, they figure out, how does a B1 compare to a B3? It's really not perfect, but it's the best that can to Then there is.
So they compete together, yes, but there is a factor that had an additional handicap or to the score. Yeah,
yes. And it's the same across all the categories. Okay. Then there is the sitting category, which is mostly people who are paraplegics, but it also depends which level of the spine is where is the break? Yeah. Because if you have a low break, you can use your abdominal muscles, you can use all this. So again, they're classified based on where the break is. And then this is a more rare one, but they do appear, there are people who are double above the knee amputees. So they can't use prosthetics to walk or move around, and they use a wheelchair. So it's not a spine injury. So they have access to all the muscles. So in real life, they're perhaps seen as terribly disabled because they have no legs, but in skiing, they have a huge advantage because they've got all those muscles. And in slalom, they tend to do really well because their sit ski is really small and compact. It doesn't have to make room for the paralyzed legs in front. So in slalom, they just zit, 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 zit. They're amazing. So that's the sitting category, again, with a factor depending on, where the paralysis is, and or if it's a double above the knee. Then there's a standing group, which is where I was. And that's everybody who's standing. Everybody, anything. So it could be...
And not blind.
Yeah. Yes, sorry. Standing and not blind. Yeah. Correct. So we can all see. And that's people like me who have cerebral palsy. And cerebral palsy can be the way I have it, which is diplegic, so from the waist down, or more often hemiplegic, which is one side of the body, and it's interesting because in my case, my legs are affected. And in skiing, you use your legs a lot more than anything else. Hemiplegia in cerebral palsy, the arm ends up being more affected. So their arm might be affected and their leg not so much. But anyway, so we're all racing together. Then there are all types of amputees. So from a single arm amputee, which is like no disability in skiing, frankly, because the only time they're losing out is a little bit on the push on the start, and the rest of their body is able-bodied and they ski beautifully. So like my friend Marie Boucher, who raced for France, and Vincent Gauthier Manuel also raced for France, both beautiful skiers, amazing friends. And they're both arm amputees, and the way they skied, it's just like, just amazing. Just beautiful. And then there are, you could be a single below the knee amputee. So you're racing on a prosthetic limb, and a single above the knee amputee, which is also quite common. So you're racing on one ski with outriggers, these little skis. And that category has always been very competitive, especially on the men's side. And they are exceptional at slalom because in slalom, you have to quickly get, for me, both your feet around the gate, but they only have to get one foot around. So they are just incredible. So they are often faster than able-bodied people in slalom because they just, like for them, it's like it's incredible. It's incredible to watch. And I can think of a number of guys. The Australian team was always strong and the American team was always really strong in that category.
So into the standing category, everyone is competing together, and there's also this ratio that goes into account. So when I did my research a little bit, I saw next to your different medals those acronyms. So the LW3, LW4 that describe the subcategory that you had.
Yes.
But there was not all the LW. You had, for example, for Nagaro, you had LW3, LW4. 5, 7, 6, 8. I said, why not 1 and 2? So could you explain?
You know what? I don't even remember because I do remember one thing is that I originally, I hope I don't get this wrong, I think I was an LW3 when I started, which was essentially disability in both lower limbs, skiing on 2 skis.
Yes.
Then my teammate, also from Calgary, younger than me, Lauren Wollstonecroft, came along, and she was born missing so you have 2 bones in your lower leg, your tibia and your fibia, and she was born missing one of those and a hand. So, and then she had surgery when she was very, very little, because you can't, when you don't have both bones, you can't weight bear. So her options were to live like that and live in a wheelchair, but with only one hand, or have surgery when she was little to have an amputation so she could walk on prosthetics. So in a way, compared to other friends who maybe lost a leg during an accident, she had the perfect amputation because it was surgically done when she was 1 year old at the Toronto Children's Hospital. She had the perfect, because there's a level of amputation that is perfect for function. So she had the perfect amputation, both legs, and she walked on prosthetics very, very well. But was also born missing a hand. And so she comes along, and she could be classified either as disability in both lower limbs skiing on two skis like me, or this way, disability in one leg, one arm. There was no triple thing. And also it's interesting because, of course, when people hear about her disability, oh my gosh, it's a triple amputee. But she, and there was another guy from Australia who's the same. He was a double below the knee amputee. And then we had another guy on our team later. The legs that they had in going into their prosthetics were able-bodied, and they had balance and they had all these things. So it's absolutely impressive what they did. They all kind of had a different position on their skis due to their prosthetics. But so that's why in the end, it ended up being LW3-4 at some point. They changed. So these things evolved. And just like everything we've talked about, the evolution, I will say it sounds terribly complicated. And I don't think that's what I want. It's important to know because actually, when I first wanted to be in the Paralympic Games, and I'd almost forgotten about this, I was like, I want to go. And I was told by the Canadian Association of Disabled Skiing that I can't because there is no class for me, that there aren't enough women with cerebral palsy the way I have it for me to race against. I don't know who told me that. And they didn't realize that I would just be in the standing class. So I went through a period at the beginning, totally devastated. And I was told incorrectly that I could never be in the Paralympics, which is wrong. But it also shows it's true that during my entire very, very long career, there was only one other woman who had cerebral palsy the way I did, the same way. She competed. Well, she didn't even, sometimes she'd make the US team, but we were the exact same disability. And I was a much, 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 much better ski racer than her, like really substantially. So I don't know so it just kind of, and there were no guys even with my disability. I think with my disability, the disability in both legs and the balance, I don't know that you'd want to ski and get good. I shouldn't say there were none. There was a guy on the Canadian development team for a while. And I gave him, because I have some equipment secrets and stuff. And so I worked with him and he was one of my roommates for a while. But really, I can think of him and I can think Craig and Hannah. And those are the two people in my entire career that I met who had cerebral palsy the same way that I did. Whereas the hemiplegic type of the arm being more affected than the leg was very, very common. And they skied very well. Because again, it was mostly just the arm that was affected. So, and the leg too, but maybe not as much.
And did you, so obviously everyone will feel like they are not advantaged by the different scoring system or the. I
don't know if everyone, but yeah, some people.
Yes, yeah. Some people will feel that it's unfair sometimes, right? And so talking about Lauren Wollstonecraft, sorry. She's coming from Calgary as well. She's competing with you on many occasions, right? Yes. And 4 times she ended up with a gold medal and you with the silver or bronze, right?
2010, yeah.
2010, and yes, and so, and as you mentioned, right? She had the right amputation that she was used to her. So did you felt frustrated during your career that sometime your handicap your disability was a little bit more contrarian and you always lost this gold medal?
No, because Lauren, her nickname was Pud, so I might sometimes say that. No, Lauren.
What does it mean?
Nothing. It was in an era when she first made the team. It was in an era that you'd go to your first national team camp and they would try to come up with a nickname for you, anything. And nobody could think of one for her. Like mine was Lumpy. Anyway, we can get to that later. And hers was but hers is the one that has stuck like nothing. We were having lunch and she was young and she said, "What's for dessert? Pudding?" And one of the old veterans of the team was like, "Pudding." He's like, "That's going to be your nickname." And she's like, "What?" And then it turned into Pud, and then revolutions per minute, RPM. So raw pudding mass. Like we had all these different ridiculous iterations of her nickname. So I do now tend to think of her as Lauren, but most of the time when we were on the team together, she was Pud. And it means nothing. It's absolutely just an absolutely random thing. But we felt we had reached success when her grandfather started calling her Pud too. So it was really, and my parents call her Pud. They don't call her, they knew her as Lauren, and they know her parents, and our families know each other. And then, how's Pud? Even everybody says, how's Pud? So she and I have it's a great story. I think she deserves every win she ever had. She's exceptional. She was an exceptional racer, an exceptional skier. I think my frustration for sure showed up, and I wish I could have changed this. When we first started out, so we're both from Calgary, I was on the national team. She was on the Alberta team. And I remember my sister was coaching with the Alberta team just as volunteer one day. And I was there, and we were training GS, and it was cold, and Pud's pants weren't zipped up all the way down. And my sister was like, oh, I thought she was just an arm amputee. I said to her, your pants aren't zipped down all the way. And then I saw that she doesn't have legs. So, anyway, so she was with the Alberta team. And I remember we had, I think it was nationals at Sunshine, which was my home mountain. So I was back at Sunshine. We showed up, and the rest of the team was late. It was just her and I. And I remember we rode up the Wawa T-bar, and we're skiing, and she wasn't, because she only has the one pole, she wasn't pole planting. So I was like, well, you need to pole plant for timing. So I remember I taught her how to pole plant. This is many, many years ago. And then in no time at all, because she'd skied growing up, but she wasn't a ski racer like I had been. Then eventually, she quite quickly, I think, made the national team. And I remember that season. I do remember the first time she beat me in a World Cup in Switzerland. And I was surprised, and I was frustrated, and I was kind of mad. And I didn't think that she'd get that good that fast, and that she'd beat me. And I probably wasn't my proudest moment. Like I'm sure I said congratulations and stuff, but I'm sure it was also obvious that I was annoyed, because I had been dominating. I was number one in Super G, and I was dominant, and I was really confident. So this is like, what is this? It really came as a surprise for me in the beginning. And then it was clear, then she started to dominate. But it took me a while to adjust, because and I think now that I'm older, I think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I felt that. I think it's normal to feel that way, but then it's how do you behave? And
do you feel like it was like a floor on top of you that was preventing you?
No, never.
Because do you think that it was just a question of physical capabilities and technique, or
she was?
Did you feel like your disability was preventing you to be competitive?
I never thought about it as my disability versus her disability. I can tell you that she had abilities that I didn't, like to put a ski on edge and hold it on edge and do things. But again, she's still nevertheless very disabled. And the factoring system, the way it was, maybe it wasn't fair, but that's not what made her win. She was fast. No question about it. Like, she was faster in raw time than many people. Raw time being the non-calculated time than many people. She had a unique way of skiing, and she was never that close to the gates because she had a very kind of stable platform, and she would just tip those skis beautifully on edge, from one side to the other. She was extremely fast and very mentally strong. We have very, very different personalities. Like, I was very emotional and like also smiley and all this. We were really, really close when we were on the tour. So Mona was my best friend, and the three of us were together for a short time. So Mona and I were the older ones, and then Pud came along. And then Mona retired before the Salt Lake Games, which no one expected, because you don't generally retire just before. And then it was Put and I were really tight that whole time. She was my roommate.
It's so strange because at the same time you are coming from the same place, you are competing in the same team, but it's like your best friend is also your best nemesis. So
Yes.
it's conflicting
And at the time,
feelings.
I didn't really feel it. I think the Salt Lake Games are the perfect illustration of that. She, if I remember correctly, it's hard to remember everyone else's games experience because you're so in your own. I'm pretty sure she had a big crash in the downhill. She didn't finish the downhills, and but then she came back, and I can't remember. She definitely won the slalom, I believe, which was the last race of the games. And at the time, I loved slalom, and slalom was my baby. I'm a European through and through. It's like slalom. I don't know. There's something about slalom, and none of the Canadian team liked slalom ever. I was the only one who even liked it even a little bit. And I was the only person of European extraction on the team. I was like, come on, slalom's great. They're like, no, downhill all the way. So now maybe that's why I think a combined would be great, because it's my combined Canadian and European self. I don't know. But she, if I'm not mistaken, she won the slalom in Salt Lake City. And, she was great. And I right now looking back, I podiumed in every race in Salt Lake, which is astonishing and amazing. But at the time, I didn't win any of them. I got 2 silvers and 2 bronze. And so I felt like it wasn't good enough. And that last day, and it was a long drive from the hill back to the village in Salt Lake City. And we were in the van, and, she got her, we got her medals at the venue. And I didn't want to take away from, I was happy for her, and she deserved it, and she skied well and everything. And I just couldn't stop crying. I just cried the whole way, and I just cried and cried and cried, and I kept crying. We were roommates. We were in our room, and then the room next to us were Brian and Robin. We were sharing a little unit, and our little unit won all the medals for Canada, those games. And apparently, I found out later that the sledge hockey or para ice hockey team, they only have 1 medal that they can win. They have to play all the games. Apparently, they would go by our room, because if you won a medal, they'd put a thing on your door. Congratulations, Lauren. Congratulations, Brian. Congratulations, Karolina, for winning this medal in this discipline. So our door was covered in these. So apparently, the ice hockey team would go by our room every day on their way to practice or to a game. And each of them would stop at our door, and they'd put their hand on the door and try to inhale all these medals and this performance. So it's about being an inspiration without realizing it. So Brian, Pud, and I and Robin, of course, were contributing to all of Team Canada. But all that to say, we get back to the village. It's the last night. I'm still crying, and it's over. The games are over, and there's a party in the village, and for whatever reason, it started in the Canada section, because that's how it always starts. It's all planned that way. And then we went to the main, but so it starts in Canada section. All my friends from all around the world are coming to trade clothes and all this. And I'm crying. I'm crying because I also thought, I was pretty sure it was going to be my last Paralympics. And I hadn't won a gold. And I think I thought I was a tremendous failure, but I wasn't. I won more medals for Canada than any other athlete at the Salt Lake Games, Olympic or Paralympic. I didn't know that at the time either. And, 2 silvers and 2 bronzes isn't too shabby. But I had these crazy expectations. But in terms of Pud and her, her performance, and then her dominating, by the time so then the 2006 Torino Games happened, and I had retired. I was no longer ski racing, but I was there as part of the Canadian Paralympic Committee team. I was the athlete mentor, and I had crashed in downhill. The season that I'd won the overall World Cup title. So I was number 1 in the world at that time when I crashed in 2003. 2006, I'm in Torino, part of the Canadian Paralympic Committee delegation. And we were 3 people, basically. So I was doing a bunch of things. And they said, we have a senator visiting and a parliamentary secretary, and we need someone to show them around. It's not the Canadian Paralympic Committee that we have today. It was 3 people, essentially, 3 or 4 people on the ground, very few of us, at least in the Alpine venue. So I'm standing in the stands at the bottom of the downhill in Sestriere in Italy with a senator and a parliamentary secretary, and I'm explaining skiing, but I'm watching, Pud and all the other girls and women I raced against race. And I was like, I can still beat this one. I just stood there and I watched and I was like, I can still win. I think I can still do this. And that moment was when I kind of got the idea of making a comeback. And then Vancouver got it. And then I went and talked to someone at Alpine Canada, and I went and saw a neurologist in Whistler. And then the process started of making the comeback. But all that to say, Pud success Paralympic wise started in Salt Lake. She continued. I think she did very well in Torino. And then in Vancouver 2010, she won everything. And at that point, after I made my comeback for 2010, the team had changed completely. We were part of Alpine Canada. We had a different coaching staff. The team was there were far more women on the team than before, where it used to be there were just a few of us. A lot of things had changed. She'd been dominant for a long time. And I started making my comeback, and we weren't really friends we weren't friends anymore at all. And that was the hardest thing for me. Cause you described how it can, and then suddenly it was like, we were, each other's, again, we were part of Team Canada. We're teammates. And I think we wished each other well, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't like we were friends racing against each other. It was like we were Team Canada teammates racing against each other, but we weren't friendly the way we had been, the first go around. But she's extremely accomplished, and she deserves everything she got. Absolutely.
Did you have any regrets on your whole high performance athlete career?
I like to say that I do. Well, it's interesting because when I was trying to decide whether I should make the comeback, it wasn't an easy decision, and I was already a grown woman, and I was thinking, I spent a lot of time soul searching, and I actually worked with a life coach on my own to try to. She really helped me to try to figure it out, and I was most concerned of my history of concussions, and because the neurologist in Whistler, after she'd done all the tests, said, I can't give you a green light to say you can keep racing. It's dangerous for you because of your history of concussions. She said, but I won't give you a red light either. So she left the decision up to me, which was really difficult. But I'll never forget that she said that to me. And eventually, at the time, I was just living and working in Vancouver, just like anybody, just had a life. And I'm working with this life coach, but I had an amazing boss. And actually, she used to work at Sport Canada. And I said, I'm thinking of maybe doing a comeback. I hadn't said anything to anybody. And my goodness, if it weren't for her, I have to name her Dormy Elling. And she is at the Rick Hansen Foundation in BC. She said to me, she was incredible. I remember this conversation. She said in all the years that she had worked at Sport Canada, she'd had a number of national team athletes who worked for her. And she said that group broke down into two. They were retired. Either those who were happy that they'd retired, they'd moved on, they were fine. And those who weren't, who were struggling with retirement. And in that group, it broke down again into those, I think, who made a comeback and who didn't, and so on. Anyway, she explained it to me really well. And she basically, even though she was my boss and I had to work for her, and we were working on staging the 2010 games, as it happens, that was my job. She encouraged me and I said, well, there's this NORAM, which is like beneath the World Cup. So there's Europa Cup and NORAM, which is the next level down. Because I'd retired, so I'd lost all my points. I'd lost all my standing. You don't stay on the list if you're not racing. So I had to start again. So again, I was starting on my own, and I drove out to the interior of BC to do this NORAM, and I was so nervous. It was a GS, an easy thing. I skied terribly, but I knew there were some national team coaches there, and I think in one of them I fell. Another one I won, but I didn't ski well because it's not as competitive as the World Cup. So she encouraged me, and I was taking time off to go do these things. And then it was interesting because I remember being so nervous that first race. But as soon as my feet hit the wand, so the wand is the thing that starts the timer, and I started going, and I knew I was skiing terribly. I was out of shape, out of practice. I was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. Why did I ever stop skiing? And from that moment, it was like, okay, I have to just go back to skiing.
So what was the subcategories? So you mentioned there's two main categories. The one who move on.
Do you know, and I'm forgetting now what she told me, because she said the ones who are fine with it, the ones who aren't, the ones who, oh yes, it goes the ones who aren't okay with it, so they decide to make a comeback, the ones who don't make a comeback and stay miserable. And then in the category of those who make a comeback, those who succeed and those who don't succeed. So I ended up being a person who made a comeback and succeeded. But at the time when she told me that, I had no idea. It was something like that. But I hadn't told anybody because I hadn't really made the decision, but I felt I needed to tell her if I was going to get time off work to go do these races, she had to know. So, but it was that there were these clear moments in the comeback path of standing in the stands in Torino with the senator and being like, I can do this, of my feet passing the wand at Silver Star Mountain in BC and that giant slalom and being like, whoa, this is way more fun than having a day job. Why did I ever quit skiing? And then being like this, it was back like instantaneously, because it's not just my love of skiing. I also love racing. I love competing. So it's not, I do love skiing, but I love racing.
If I was an athlete, still competing at a very high level, and I'm a little bit scared about retirement, right? And I'm at the edge of it. I feel like it's coming, and I'm super scared. What will you tell me?
Well, so one thing I could say is I mentioned that I was working at the Canadian Olympic Committee when I injured my spine. But I was working there in a program that just happens to be housed within the Canadian Olympic Committee that provides services to Canadian national team athletes, whether able-bodied or disabled. It's called Game Plan. And that program initially, when it was established after the 2010 Games, was for that, to help national team athletes in Canada transition out of sport. So that is what a lot of people associate with Game Plan, is that it's a program to help you think through your retirement and kind of, it helps you for up to 2 years after you retire. That was the origin of Game Plan. And now it has evolved to be a bit of a more robust program. So there are, I don't work there anymore, and I don't have it all in my head anymore, but there are, I think, several pillars. So they have like an education pillar. And so you can get a scholarship to go to the Smith School of Business at Queen's, or you can get help if you're a student at a university and trying to manage, like I did, your education and your sport. There is employment, so you can get an internship, but still be doing your athlete schedule. That's what's so challenging for athletes. And people in the real world don't realize that being an athlete is a full-time job, often one that is not paid. And it's more of a full-time job than just a job, because it's what you love. It's what you've been doing since you were a baby, and you're giving it everything you have. But you also, in Canada, that's how our society, unless you are an able-bodied Olympian who is really well known, I'm talking like a Penny Alexiak in swimming or Andre de Grasse in athletics, etc., chances are you will need to have a job at some point. And that, for Paralympians, is usually throughout our career. For Olympians, it's maybe after. But that's a reality of what amateur sport in Canada. So there are all these programs within Game Plan that are set to help you. So I just want to put that shout out for national team athletes so they know that exists. But in terms of personally how to go about retirement, both times, this is crazy, both times, what led to my retirement was a high-speed crash in downhill in Kimberley, BC, at the same mountain. That's the thing that's crazy. That led to a massive concussion. And so I had no choice. My retirement was decided for me both times. And that first time...
Does it make things harder or...
Harder. I was about to say, oh, it depends, but it makes it harder, because if you're an athlete and you're thinking about retirement and you're afraid of it, well, you can plan, you can start thinking, you can use the resources that Game Plan has, and maybe your national sport organization has some. Maybe you have a sports psychologist, someone you can trust outside your sport, because maybe your coach is not the person to talk to about it. You can think about this in advance. But if you crash and lose consciousness and get a concussion and are forced to retire, you didn't plan it and you're injured. And so then you're focusing on recovering from your injury, yes, and you're not thinking. I was focused on recovering from my injury and getting better so that I could get back on skis. And I did not want it. People were like, maybe you should. I hated everybody who said to me, from doctors to teammates to friends to my family, suggesting delicately, well, maybe you should retire. And I was like, I don't want to talk about it, So I think your question is great, because you may be scared or unsure. I would encourage all high performance athletes to have some kind of a plan in place. And in addition to that, they've done studies in Canada and internationally that show that high performance athletes who live a more balanced life. So I don't think I was super balanced, but I think I wanted to give skiing everything I had. So who maybe take some classes or have a significant other or even have a pet, or I don't know what it is, but like have hobbies and do things outside of their sport, they perform better. It's actually a legal performance enhancer, because when you go to the games, you're not just Karolina the ski racer. And when you crash or retire, your whole identity isn't taken away from you. You still are you. Now I'm Karolina, just Karolina. But it really took me a long time to figure out who I was without skiing. And even then I wanted to come back. So I wasn't done.
Well, you without skiing.
Oh, now I don't ski at all. And I'm still the same person I always was. I just didn't. And that's why I found the first question hard to answer, because I still identify with the ski racer, the high performance athlete, the person who's involved in Paralympic sport. But then now I sit here and I think, well, who am I? I'm the same person I was when I was 3, 4, 5 years. I'm still me. I'm still Karolina. And all that time, it just came, as I said, it came as a surprise that the Paralympics existed, that I made it.
There's no big identity crisis.
There was. Absolutely, there was. Yeah. When especially the second time around, when I was really severely concussed, and it took over a year of me doing nothing and lying alone in my living room in the dark, in silence, not moving physically, not being exposed to light or sound. And that was extremely difficult. There was a major identity crisis, and, I'm not moving. So I quickly gained, 60 pounds, because you go from being a super active person to lying down and not moving, so my entire body changed, and I was, completely shocked, and I still had a concussion. So I wasn't processing things properly. And concussions are interesting. They've kind of broadly categorized the symptoms that you get. So you have the physical symptoms that come on right away, like vomiting, loss of consciousness, dizziness, blurry vision, all of that, neck pain, headaches. Then cognitive symptoms. So difficulty remembering, difficulty processing. I had all of that too. And then a third group that is kind of more newly discovered, the emotional and psychological symptoms. So anxiety, depression, emotional lability, so emotional instability. And what they found is that as the physical symptoms decrease, so as you're getting better physically, the cognitive and emotional ones increase. So because I think you're getting better, so you're better able to grasp maybe the severity of your injury. But so it's a super interesting thing to go, I wouldn't recommend it, but it's a super interesting thing to go through. And then add on to that you've lost your sport that you love, you've lost your friends that you love, you've lost being on the World Cup and going to the Alps and racing and competing. I felt like I'd lost it.
Your ranking.
Yeah. So I felt like I'd lost everything in a way. There was absolutely an identity crisis. And so then now if you say, who am I? I just say, well, I'm just me, because that's still there. And And I think now I'm older and it's been a while since I've retired, and now I'm a co-chef de mission. I've meditated and I've done visualization and yoga when I was an athlete, and I still carry that forward with me. I think I have a more holistic view of myself than I did when I was a skier. And I also I grew up in that era where it was like your sport or, everything or nothing. And that's not actually healthy, and it's not necessary. And I also felt very much that I had to be that way because I was a Paralympian, and I had to show that I'm the same as the Olympians. I'm everything or nothing. I'm not going to be half-assed about my efforts. Mind you, nobody really was nobody was watching. Nobody cared how much I was training on my own in Banff with Stacy. It was just the results that mattered. And I was probably putting in more at that time than I needed to because I was doing really well. But that's also my personality. I just kind of give everything I have. Like when I crash, I crash. When I had that last crash, I skied down to one of my coaches, and he's Québécois, but he was so funny. He's like, because I didn't crash that often. And he's like, Caro. He's like, wow. Because my face was all bloody and everything. I didn't know I had blood everywhere. Because I hit the side of my head and my mouth somehow. So I was bleeding, but I didn't realize. And so I had blood kind of. Caro, oh my, when you crash, you really crash. You never crash. And when you crash, you really crash. And I didn't know I had a concussion either. But yeah, that's the funny story about, when I do things, I do if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it the full 100%.
So I really want before the end to talk about the Paris Paralympics, right? And we could spend another couple of hours just talking about. Sorry. No, don't be sorry. It's passionating. I'm frustrated about not having enough time to go more in depth. So talking about Caro, the co-chef de mission what's your role? What are your responsibilities, and how do you enjoy this new chapter of your life?
So normally when a country sends a team to an Olympic Games or Paralympic Games, always there's a chef de mission, which for those of you who speak French, maybe it helps you think of what it is, but it's essentially the head of Team Canada or the head of the delegation. And so it's a huge honor, first of all, to be selected to do that. You're the head of the team of all the sports. And then in my case, the Winter Games, Olympic and Paralympic, are much smaller than the Summer Games. Summer Games are huge. And I'm pretty sure this is the first time in history that a winter athlete in Canada has been chosen to lead a summer team. So I'm really honored about that as well. It's super cool. And then in the case of the Paralympic team, this time we're doing a bit of an experiment, which is normally there's a chef de mission and sometimes also an assistant chef, but there is that chef person. And then there is an Athletes Council at the Canadian Paralympic Committee. And recently they learned all that a chef does. And they thought, oh my goodness, that's actually a lot of work for one person. Maybe we should have two. So I'm actually a co-chef de mission for Paris with my co-chef de mission colleague, Josh Vandervies. He's based in Vancouver. And he was a boccia athlete. It's a summer sport. It's kind of like, it's like boccia, but in wheelchairs. I don't know. It's like I don't want to say it's like pétanque because it's not, but it's like a sport where you throw a ball to be closer to the other ball. Like it's very strategic. And
it's in Olympic Games? It's
in the Paralympic Games only. So boccia and goalball are the two sports that only exist in the Paralympics. Okay. So boccia, it tends to be for people with a higher level of disability, and goalball, which is for visually impaired athletes. So other than that, all the sports in the Paralympics have Olympic counterparts like swimming, cycling, athletics, yes, but not ski jumping. So, not all of them, but many of them. So Josh is my co-chef, and what our role is, the way I see it, I break it down into three things. One, and this is the most important one for me by far, is to be a mentor and a set of ears and support for every single athlete on Team Canada, which is a lot of people. But I think it's really important. Not only that, I want to be there for athletes in whatever way they want me to be there for them. But also people often forget these other people, their coaches and the staff who surround them in their daily training environment every day. These people have been on that 4-year or 8-year or lifetime journey with their athletes. And this is a big moment for them too. And it can be very stressful. It can be very emotional. They also need support. So I see my role as co-chef de mission to be there to support everybody on Team Canada, which is going to be hundreds of people. So I won't be able to maybe make contact with everybody. But I have been repeating that because every athlete is different. You take Pud and me, for example, same sport, we're from the same city, we're same sport, same classification, but we were very different people and had very different needs. She probably, she didn't need to be chatting with people, and she probably didn't want to be bothered by anybody. I was I leaned on our sports psychologist, John, very strongly, and I was so glad he was there. But perhaps I could have used someone out. He was part of our Alpine team. Perhaps I could have used someone external to my sport. Just, somebody that I know knows what I'm going through, good or bad. Because I may have won 8 Paralympic medals, but I've also, come second or fourth by 100th of a second, or crashed and not even finished. So I've done it all. So I think it's important to know that they have that friendly face who's neutral, and they can come talk to us. And I think it's important, Josh is a man, I'm a woman. So there's if they're more comfortable talking to a man or a woman, there's that.
So are you just waiting for them to proactively come to you with their needs, or do you have like a strategy or a plan of activities?
We do. So our budget isn't huge in terms of what we can do. I was just earlier this week, I was at the Olympic and Paralympic swim trials in Toronto, which was great. And so then they had the trials that night. And then right then, every sport works differently. Right then, it's decided who makes the team. And I had the honor of giving the Paralympians their Team Canada jacket. They were named and they came and I gave them their jacket. It was awesome. I won't necessarily get to do that with every sport. When I started out as co-chef de mission, I thought that's what I get to do. It's just we don't have the capacity, the monetary capacity, honestly. Yeah. But it was wonderful. And Josh and I also were co-chef de mission for the Para-Pan Am Games in Santiago in November, which was great because there is where I met a lot of the athletes already, a lot of the coaches, a lot of the staff who will be in Paris. Not all, it's not all the same, but many of them. And that was essential, I find. And the Olympic Committee decided to do things differently. They had a chef de mission for Santiago, a female wrestler, and they have a chef de mission for Paris, Bruni Surin. So Bruni didn't have that early contact in Santiago that Josh and I have had, which was fantastic. And now I've gone to swim trials, and we have various media events here and there. So some athletes I've gotten to know quite well. Yeah. Others I haven't gotten to know as well. And right now, as of today, we've only just named the swimmers, the 20 swimmers. And Canada has a berth in some team sports. Like we know that men's and women's basketball, wheelchair rugby, women's sitting volleyball, women's goalball, and para-equestrian as team sports, Canada will go. We just haven't named the individuals on those rosters. We all have a pretty good idea who they're going to be. But so the team announcements are going to be started this week and are going to continue all the way till August. The opening ceremony is August 28th in Paris. Our opening ceremony, most people have probably heard that the Olympic opening ceremony will take place on the Seine. It sounds like it will be fantastic. It's on my actual birthday, July 26th. I'm like, yes, it'll be so much fun. I won't be there, but I'll watch with my niece and nephews. And then in August for ours, it will also be its own special thing. We are going to be marching down the Champs-Élysées to Place de la Concorde. So, and the stadium, as it were, will be Place de la Concorde. Total, like all the seating will be there. So it will be, you see, and so it gives. And it's interesting because I will say I was there in January and Paris has done something that not even London was doing. I was blown away. I'm in the grocery store, just getting groceries in Paris. And the radio comes on and it's, Martine, how are you going to get around? How are you going to get to work during the Olympic and Paralympic Games? I'm going to do this, that, everything. It was always paired.
Yes.
Always. And Vancouver didn't do that. I lived in Vancouver. I didn't hear that in Vancouver. It's incredible. And I even went to get my hair cut in Paris. And the hairdresser said, I won't be here during the Olympics because it's going to be too crazy. Or no, I will be here during the Olympics because we expect a lot of people. And I said, darn, I didn't tell him who I was or anything. I said, I'm going to be here during the Paralympics. And I was fully expecting him to say, what are the Paralympics? But no, everybody in Paris. So I have to hand it to the organizing committee. And I feel like the same as with London, everyone in Paris knows what the Paralympics are now, even before they've happened. And I feel like hopefully everyone in France and perhaps in the rest of Europe will also get to know. So it also resides with the organizing committee and how they're going about it and how they're putting it out there. And I've seen posts from Tony Estanguet, who's the president of the organizing committee. And you see his full all staff pictures, and you can see that they've hired people with a disability. So there is, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that there is some kind of thought towards being more integrated in terms of how it's organized and so on. And the organizing committee, it's been like this for a long time. Ever since they've been matched, the Olympics and the Paralympics, it's the same organizing committee who puts them on. So I know in Nagano, it was 2 separate committees. And I believe that by Salt Lake, it was 1 committee. So like VANOC, the Vancouver organizing committee, they were for the Olympics and the Paralympics. Yeah. Same thing with Paris. And it's great.
So if there is more views, more money generated out of the Paralympic, is it going to impact financially the athlete in a way or another? How finance are working around the Paralympics games? Is it only sponsor based? Are they paid by?
So it depends. Every country is different. So I would say broadly, if Paris has this amazing visibility, which I think it will, and I hope it does, it will bring it up for every Paralympian across the world. However, it's a different story if you're from a small country that doesn't have a lot of resources versus what you'd think, Canada or the United States or France. So each country is differently, it works differently. And I can only speak, like I spoke about Sochi. If you were a Russian athlete competing for Russia at that time, and you got a medal, it was hugely beneficial. Meanwhile, that was 2014. 2010, 4 years earlier, I was a Canadian athlete competing for Canada who got medals. And it was wonderful and it was great. And I'm so proud and I was so happy to compete at home and all the rest of it. But it's not as if I was given an apartment, a car, a stipend for life. Yeah. So you see, each country approaches it differently.
Do you receive some bonus or something?
So this is really interesting. And I probably should have mentioned this earlier. I've mentioned Sport Canada a number of times. Sport Canada, as I said, is the federal government, and they kind of oversee all the national sport organizations. And they have a program in place. They've had it in place for a number of decades. It's called the Athlete Assistance Program, AAP for short. And we just say karting. In the sporting world, everybody says karting. And essentially what it is they will look at all the results of any Canadian athlete in any sport, able-bodied or not able-bodied. No, sorry, we'll start with able-bodied. So they're looking at that. And depending on that person's international ranking and a number of different variables and where they placed and time and everything, they qualify for karting, which means they get a monthly stipend from the federal government, which is fantastic. A lot of people in sport and in the public are like, but it's not, but it's not enough. I can't, because sport is expensive. And some sports like skiing are way more expensive than others. But it's not designed to cover all the expenses of being an athlete, but it's there to be a secure foundation. And it's in Canada, I think if you honestly asked all national team athletes, Olympians and Paralympians across the board, the ones who are like Penny Oleksiak, who have so many medals, or those who only made it to 1 games, I think they would all say that karting has been super important for them. But then there are those who get big sponsors and big bucks, and so maybe they don't need karting. But as a sport system as a whole, I think it's really important. And believe it or not, I couldn't believe this. The first time that they decided to look at para-alpine skiing for karting was at the 1996 World Championships in Austria, where I became a world champion in Super G and got the silver in the giant slalom. So out of that, I was the first ever female para-alpine skier in Canada to get karting, because the only 3 of us were karted from those World Championships, me and 2 of my male teammates. So crazily enough, and again, these are all stats that I had no idea, but I found out I was the first female para-alpine athlete to get karting. And it absolutely.
So does it mean that you are the first female alpine skiing being a professional athlete then?
No, that's not. It's the amateur. It's
but you're receiving monthly.
Yes, it's true, but it's considered. Your professional. It's complicated, but we're still amateur. If you're going to compete in the Olympics and Paralympics, you're still amateur, because you can.
Even though you receive monthly,
because it's from the government. I don't know. Maybe that's the difference. And that amount has, and not only do you get the stipend, you get your tuition at a Canadian university paid for. And I just started at McGill. So lucky, it was incredible. My parents couldn't believe, they had been saving for me to go to university. And then I was like, oh, but it's paid for. Yes. So it's fantastic. So
what were the range that you received from karting over your career?
To be honest, I don't remember. It has gone up. Yeah. And then sometimes it's steady.
500 and 2,000?
So it changed. It was, I started in 1996 and now we're almost 30 years later. Yes. So crazy to say that. Yeah. Oh my God, I feel old. 28 years. There's been a lot of change, and karting existed for able-bodied athletes before 1996, just to be clear.
But it's just to help understand into your category, with your performances.
Well, because I was a world champ, straight away, I just was the best in the world. Yes. So I went, you
at the top, right?
You're at the top. Yeah. So they had classifications, and over the years, they would change what they were called. It was either A, B, C, D card, or sometimes it would be usually it was A, B, C, D. So A being the highest and D being development. But sometimes those tiers, there weren't as many. It's been almost 30 years and there are changes in government, changes in ministers. But that amount of money has never gone down. It's the arguments now are about, are always about whether to increase it or not. And then there's also the question of, okay, we are providing, in my opinion, very needed funding for those top level athletes, especially on the Paralympic side, who may not have any source of other income, whether that's a job or anything. And also some of us are older. So a lot of national team athletes in able-bodied sport, they live at home. Their parents are feeding them. They have no expenses. That's also something to think about. But all this to say is that has been there consistently, and the amount has gone up. And the argument sometimes is do we increase that amount, or do we, as a sports system, put funding not just towards a person and specific athletes who are doing well, but towards the whole system? And so there's always this balance of should we provide funding directly to the athlete or to the sports themselves? Yeah. And it is a balance, because I'll tell you something: if they had given all that money to the Canadian Association for Disabled Skiing or to Alpine Canada, I wouldn't have had as long a career, because I also needed that money to pay for my rent, to pay for, I had skis first. My first career was on Atomic, and my second career was on Vocal. But by that time I was a known quantity. People knew who I was, and coaches looked at me and they said, we think Vocal is more your style. You ski more, it's better for you. And I have so much gratitude to both those men who represented both those companies, so Dave Armstrong and Sandy Webster, because they took me on, and they were both curious and open. I went on the glacier in Whistler, on the Blackcomb Glacier with Sandy, we tried to figure out my boot setup and did all this extra stuff on my own time and on his own time.
Yeah.
So they put that extra effort in, but everything costs money.
Yeah.
So,
but it was enough to live, right? To pay your rent.
No, it's not always, and it depends. Because sometimes it depends. No, it's not. But it's not designed for that. But I will not. I will always acknowledge that for me personally, karting made a massive difference. Yeah. Massive difference. Because it allowed me to be a high performance athlete a lot longer without seeking a job a lot longer. So it's absolutely important. And then the other component that you keep talking about that I haven't touched on is the sponsorship component. So yeah, I got the skis, and that's a huge cost for skiers. And then actually leading into the 2010 games, we are now part of Alpine Canada. We have more staff. There are whole departments designed for things. And companies would approach, the way it works now is a company approaches the sport and says, oh, we'd like to sponsor 3, 4, 5 athletes. And Alpine Canada looks at their entire roster across men, women, able-bodied, Paralympic, and says, okay, here we have some, depending on what they're looking for, they'll make some suggestions. And I was so lucky that because we could sell the space on our foreheads and the space on our shoulder, because the rest was covered by sponsors of the team. And so people see my outfits like, you had so many sponsors. Like, these were not my personal sponsors. These are the sponsors of Alpine Canada, which is great too. But I could sell my forehead and my shoulder, this shoulder. Crazy. This was more than this. And I got a head sponsor leading into the 2010 games, President's Choice. And that again, and they have to pay, and it's all done through Alpine Canada. So I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to seek them out.
Are they taking like a share of it?
Alpine?
Yes.
Yes, they do. Okay. Yes, they do. Yeah. But essentially, so they organize it all and they take a share of it, a percentage of it. I don't even remember what it is. But I mean, again, I was like, wow. And I remember the first season, it was me and 3 able-bodied athletes who I met all of them personally. And 2 of them are, friends, and I know them and they're great. And we even did a thing for Canada Day, the 4 of us, when the Queen came for Canada. It was cool. Anyway, then the following season came along. And, there had been a recession and this and that, the 2008 recession. And I guess it turned out that they said they only wanted to sponsor 1 athlete. And again, I couldn't believe they chose me. Of the 4 of us, they chose me. So that was also interesting. And I don't know if it cost more to sponsor an able-bodied athlete or because I was constantly sending them messages and postcards. And I wasn't really, social media wasn't that huge then, so I was actually sending real postcards from wherever. So again, it was, and it goes back to the Atomic situation. Atomic, I was the first person they sponsored on our team. They had such a good experience with me that they came back, and I had male teammates looking for sponsorships, and Atomic ended up sponsoring a whole bunch of guys on the team because they had a good experience with me. And again, as I was doing all this, it didn't occur to me, but it links back to the role of co-chef, which I was talking about. The first bit is supporting the team in whatever way they feel. And so we will have meetings with all the sports before Paris. We will sometimes be on the ground at training camps and competitions.
Are you doing PR as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So the other component, so there's that component. And the second component, I'll lump it together, is media. And also, although I don't consider, this is just me.
Is it an advantage for you for speaking French? Going
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I said in my interview, because it was like a job application, like you had to apply, you had to have been a former Paralympian, which wasn't always the case. Even in 2010, the chef de mission was not a former athlete. Okay. And they've since changed it. And I think that's very good.
For the empathy.
Yeah, well, just for the knowledge. Yeah. And when you're an athlete in your team, like the way we were prepared for 2010, it was like the Alpine team was a self-contained unit, and we didn't want interference from other people. And we kind of felt, it's a bit snobby, but we were just like, and especially not from someone who's not an athlete and doesn't know what we're doing, so just leave us alone. Our whole, it wasn't us, but our whole team was extremely, we didn't even live in the village, and which was a bit of a, being Canadian was a bit of a like, what? You're not going to live in the village? But everything was focused on performance. So the village wasn't that far. but it was far enough that you have to line up to take the bus, carry all your skis. And we lived in a hotel at the base of the mountain. We came out of the hotel directly to the gondola. And it did. It made our performance, and we trained that way. We trained that way the season before. We trained, everything was in place. And so you have to think that the teams going to Paris will have done the same thing. It's very sport specific. However, there's also this wonderful experience of being part of Team Canada and of marching in the opening ceremonies or rolling in the opening ceremonies. So one is to be there for the athletes. And I got to do a lot of that in Santiago, which is great.
Just going back quickly to your interview, right? Besides the interview process of applying for the job, right? Besides speaking French, which was probably an advantage, what were the other arguments that you deployed?
I remember I prepared extensively. I mean, it's a volunteer position, but it's with an honorarium. So I can't live off of being chef de mission. It's not a job in the sense that
it's almost voluntary.
Yeah. With, as I said, an honorarium and everything, like when I go to Paris, they're paying for my flight, everything's paid for when I'm with them, of course. But really I'm doing this on my own time. And that second piece is speaking to media, but also, we have sponsors of the Paralympic team who come to Paris. So it's interacting with them, it's interacting with the embassy and all that sort of thing. So in the interview, I don't remember that I made any arguments per se, because it was mostly them. They had questions for me. Yeah. But a lot, the whole application is you have to have been a Paralympian, not necessarily have won anything. And you have to have really proven, your commitment to the movement. And, I was athlete mentor in Torino. I was athlete mentor again for the Tokyo Games, which were COVID games. Yes. Then I was asked to be assistant chef de mission for Beijing, again, remotely for COVID. I sit on...
to me, you seems like an obvious choice. Did you had a lot of competitions? Do you feel like there was a lot of...
I had no idea.
You didn't know what were the other candidates. Okay.
But I really did apply what I learned as an athlete, and I just went in there like I was going to win the race. But I do remember they asked me about my position on, and they know me, like they know that I'm fluently bilingual. My position on, well, first of all, they asked, do you speak French? And they knew, so that then they asked some questions in French. The woman who asked, just like, I know you speak French, but they have to say in advance, now I'm going to ask the question in French, and here you go. And I was really open. Again, I think this comes with time and age and maturity. I had put a lot of thought into what I wanted to come out of, and it had been advertised as a co-chef de mission position. What I wanted to bring to the table, what I wanted to accomplish, and what I thought was important based on what I'd seen before for Canada. And I said outright, and I said, if this means I don't get the job, so be it. I said, I think it's an absolute travesty for Canada, who is a country with 2 official languages, to go to a games in Paris and not have a chef de mission who speaks fluent French. I think that is an absolute faux pas, and that can't be the case. And I said, and if that means that I don't, because I feel so strongly about that, I said, then that's okay. But I feel absolutely strongly about that, because for me, we've talked about women in sport and men in sport. We've talked about able-bodied athletes and disabled athletes. Similarly, I'm a Canadian, and I'm a proud Canadian, and I fully believe that both official languages and indigenous languages, for that matter, if they could be, should represent this country and athletes who are unilingual francophone have as many rights as unilingual anglophone athletes. And that is so often forgotten in the Canadian sports system. It's shocking. So
would you say that this argument was particularly true because those games were happening in Paris? Or would you say that if it was happening in Spain, the argument would have been the same?
I think that it happening in Paris, and Paris is this world-renowned city. You come from there. And when I talked about the expectations of the Paris Games as the biggest ones, I just think the expectation, I think, was slightly higher for Paris. But I think that expectation, I know, for example, that the president of the Canadian Committee. So he's the president of the board. Marc-André Fabien, he's a lawyer here in Montreal. He has always, and I wasn't thinking of him, but he has always been a huge proponent of the importance of French for the chef de mission, etc. So that was one of the reasons I was asked to be the assistant chef for Beijing, because my friend and teammate Josh Duick is unilingual Anglophone. He was trying in French, but it wasn't at the level that he could speak to the media or do that sort of thing. That was super important. It wasn't the only thing. Absolutely not. I mean, it was certainly an advantage. But I think what I said, and maybe it answers who is Karolina, finally, I said this, and this is absolutely true. I said, okay, I'm bilingual. I'm a Paralympian with medals and with injuries, and I've lived it all, and I've come back, and I have volunteered with the Paralympic movement for decades as well, and I'm really engaged. I've done volunteer coaching. Women in sport is super important to me, but especially in Paralympic sport and young women in Paralympic sport. I remember doing some volunteer coaching and skiing in the Ottawa and Quebec area, and I remember coaching these two girls who'd never been coached by a female, and they were already like 17, 18 years old, never been coached by a female, never been coached by someone with a disability. And I come along and I have the same disability as one of them, and I'm a woman, and I was only coaching them for not that long, and their skiing changed overnight. I couldn't believe it, just by the fact that I could relate to them, because I'm goofy and whatever also. So I could relate to them. I could relate to being 16 and 17 and being a girl with cerebral palsy on skis, because it feels like yesterday. And I could explain, they didn't come from ski racing. So there are all these terms that are used in able-bodied ski racing, like roll your ankle, that don't make any sense if you don't come from ski racing. And famously, I have to put this in. We had a coach on the national team, able-bodied. We had all able-bodied coaches, who famously once said to Pud, well, you got to roll your ankles. And she just looked at him like ice cold. She's like, I don't have any ankles. But even on the national team, or my friend Viviane, who's visually impaired, and we're inspecting at the Paralympic Games on a knoll. And one of the coaches, I'm with her and her guide, Lindsay, says, well, so you guys can see, And Viviane's like, no, I'm blind. I cannot see. Like, you have to. And we'd already, so these things still happen. But all that to say, I coached these girls, their skiing changed immensely in a very short time. And that's probably one of my proudest moments as a skier, just as a skier. I saw the difference that I could make. So I think it's important that I'm a woman. It's important that I've done it all. And I said other things. It's like, I'm an immigrant. I was a new Canadian. Like, it wasn't obvious, really. Like, it was my parents who told, but it was not obvious how to get from here to there at all. I think it's just a lot of things. And I just brought everything I have. And I am a Francophile, and I love Paris and all this stuff. And I just, it was also a risk, because I said, I know I'm a winter athlete, and these are summer games. And I said, but I'm the person for the job. And I don't often share this because I don't want to, but I'm going to. When they called me to say, so it was a co-chef position, and we knew that. When they called me to say, I got it, then I great. And then I said, well, who's my co-chef? And they said, oh, we don't know. They said, you were the number one choice of the entire panel. So we chose you first. So if you say yes, we'll go with you, and then we'll choose somebody to compliment you. And the reason I don't often say this, but I say it now because I don't think Josh will hear, is I won't say this in a national interview where I think my co-chef will hear it, because I've never shared that with him, because I don't want him to feel. But for a fact, that's how it happened. So, in one way, it's a little bit unfortunate, I suppose, that there wasn't just a chef de mission, because it would have been me. I'm a co-chef de mission, but I think, Santiago went really well. Paris will have a big footprint. We have a lot of athletes. We have a lot of ground to cover. Hopefully we'll have a lot of media interest and a lot of partners on the ground. So I think it actually, we'll see how, they're going to have to see how it goes. It's also double the work for the Canadian Paralympic Committee, because they have to organize, in fact, almost triple, because Josh was born without arms or legs. He's an electric wheelchair user. So his wife, Dahlia, is often his assistant, and she comes too. So it's like they're organizing 3 people instead of 1. But it's also nice because they have a little team. We're a little team. So sometimes we're together and, we also bounce ideas off of each other. And I have to remember, because I'm very easily influenced and swayed. And Josh is a lawyer, and so he's very convincing. I have to remember that sometimes my own opinions and gut instinct, and I have more experience than he does. Anyway, I can hold my own. But I think we agree on the big things. We have, like, right away when we knew we were going to be co-chefs, we connected and talked about the big issues, which you've brought up, which are classification, which are factor systems, which are exposure of the games, and all those big things. Josh and I are on the same page.
So we are almost at the end, unfortunately. I have 2 more questions. So the first one is, so I heard recently an interview of Marie-Amélie Le Fur, one of the French president of the Paralympic Games.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know. You know more than I do.
I will send you her podcast episode. It was very interesting. And she... And you mentioned earlier that you are a stubborn person, right? Yes. That you are passionate. So, and what she was communicating was the fact that from a political viewpoint, from urban architecture viewpoint, things are still very difficult for disabled individuals, right? And
absolutely.
What was interesting that sometimes we consider that disability, there is disabled and able-bodied individuals. And what's interesting is basically everyone is disabled in different circumstances, right? And someone who may consider as being disabled in a specific environment will not be disabled in another environment, right?
So true.
Where someone who could be considered as able may be disabled in another situation, right? So it's like more like a flow. It's not like a binary situation. So everyone is concerned by trying to have this empathy or trying to have a setup, try to have infrastructures who are more adapted to the different type of disabilities, right?
Yes.
So she's very much politically involved. She wants to change things. And I was wondering...
I want to meet her.
I mean, you will have the opportunity to meet her and listen to her episodes. You will send yours. Okay, let's spend time chatting together. She's very, very interesting. She's also a Paralympic medalist in running. She's a 100-meter runner. Her story is very interesting, and I will invite you to listen. But I was wondering around your aspiration to try to change things in the sports, but also in the society, in the urban situation. What is your take and approach on that?
Another good question. And I feel bad because I was talking so much about my story and things that I had lived, whereas I really am passionate about what I can do now and then going forward. And we've alluded to this, what will Paris bring and where have we come and where do we have yet to go? It's absolutely true, as Marie mentioned. Is it Marie?
Marie-Amélie.
Marie-Amélie, as she mentioned, and Josh, my co-chef, mentions this a lot. He had never been to Paris before we went in January. And he talked about how inaccessible Paris is. And then one day I said, "What, have you been to Paris?" I said, "It's not," he was saying things and I said, "It's not all like that." So he was pleasantly surprised, but there are absolutely, when we just think of Paris, it's a beautiful, historic, ancient city. So it's not completely accessible, physically accessible, but there's more than physical accessibility. There's, of course, visual, there are different types of disabilities. And you're right, it's a spectrum. Visual, auditory, and there are the physical ones. There are also, learning disabilities or learning differences. Often now we talk more about, instead of saying an amputee, we might say the person has a limb difference. And when someone has dyslexia, we might say they have a learning difference. So it's important to realize, of course, there's so much variety in humanity. And I actually really like this concept of the fluidity of being able-bodied or disabled, because my personal experience growing up was I felt very much that there was a dichotomy and that I was very much over here and I didn't quite know where I fit in. Whereas it's true, my sister who's able-bodied, she broke her leg severely. She lives in New York City, and suddenly she was faced with the reality of, and she's my sister. She knows as much as anybody. She's very close to me, and she grew up with me and saw what I went through. But she had to, on a daily basis, try to navigate the New York City subway with a broken leg, and it was an absolute nightmare. And then again, too, many people, people are living longer. Of course, as you get older, more and more of us become disabled. And to your point, I don't feel this is true, but maybe somebody would see me on skis and they'd be like, well, she's not disabled. Well, I totally am. It's just that I trained my whole life to make it look easy, but I totally still have my disability. But maybe to most people, I'm most free and I don't, it's true. I feel freer on a bike or on skis than I do on foot, right? So I have this freedom, but it's a lovely notion. And it comes back to something I talk about actually now as a public speaker, and I hadn't put it together. I talk a lot about this component of empathy, but more importantly, and I always say this because just yesterday I was giving a conference on disability, equity, and inclusion, and at the very basic level, and I think I love that people are interested, but they can often be intimidated. They feel very afraid to say anything, to ask anything, to do the wrong thing. And I love the fact that I'm now in this position to be able to kind of debunk all these mysteries and make people, it's not about educating them. That's not really my role, to give them the list of all the disabilities and whatever. It's about making people feel comfortable. And I think the Paralympics can do that too, on a much bigger scale than I can as a person. But the thing I always say, and I think I will say to the day I die, is, and I think this makes it accessible for everyone, is okay, maybe people feel uncomfortable or unsure. And I say, wait a minute. Okay, there's me, there's you. What is the thing that we have in common? Maybe let's add 20 other people. So there's more variety, because we could say we live in Montreal. We could say these things. So let's take, we're in a room of 22 people. What do we all have in common, no matter what? Some people are young, some people are old, whatever. We are all human beings. That's always my thing. It's about humanity. So I always say, if you see someone with, and this is a person with a visible disability that you can see, if you see someone with a disability and you're curious, but genuinely curious in the way that a child is, as I mentioned earlier, the most important thing is to remember, well, wait a minute, this is a human being. This is a person before me. So what do? You look at them, you smile, you say hello, you treat them the same as you do anybody else. And I think people are often just so shocked, maybe because they haven't seen somebody with a particular disability before. And I understand. I remember my first nationals, and there were all these prosthetic limbs in the ski lodge. I was like, what is going on? I just had no idea. So it's a totally natural response to be like, oh, I'm not sure. But it's a human being. And that goes to what Marie-Emilie was saying, that there's a spectrum of human experience. And at different times in your life, you will be well, you might be ill. You might have a permanent disability or an impermanent one, but just to remember the human aspect, humanity and empathy, and it's really, especially at the Paralympic level, like it's interesting because I think living with a disability, there are challenges, and what I experienced with my spine surgery, those things are real. But should I finish?
No.
Yeah. Those things are real. Those challenges exist. And we should continue to work as a society to make spaces more accessible in urban planning, architecture, and everything. But on the other hand, especially when you go to the Paralympics and you watch, it's like, but they're not a big deal. It's not that big a deal. It doesn't actually stop anyone from doing anything, right? Or we still have, it's both. It's like I had to overcome certain challenges and then also, but then I had to become a great athlete, and becoming a great athlete is anybody can have that desire. So, and that push. So it's still, and this is me. You'll talk to another person with a different disability, like Marie-Émilie or Josh or anyone, and they'll have a slightly different take on it, depending on, were they born with their disability? Where did they grow up? What kind of support did they receive or not receive? So I never want to say that I'm speaking on behalf of all of Canadian Paralympians or people with a disability, but I would say, it's an interesting, I'm going to take that and think about it. It's interesting.
As a final question, it's the final one, but you mentioned how impactful and how important it was, about to coach and support those young disabled athletes, right? If you were into the car with your father and your sisters, and you crying, coming back from a ski, what would you say to the young Caro?
Oh my God, your questions are too good. I think essentially all the things I was saying to these girls, because they immediately started spilling all their frustrations too, because they just, and maybe a lot of the things my sister and my dad were saying to me. I don't remember exactly the words, but I do remember specifically that it was provincials. I'd made it to able-bodied provincials. I was so proud. And then at the provincials, I crashed and I did poorly and I was crying. But I remember being so proud that I had made it to able-bodied provincials in Alberta, which is a province full of ski racers. That was a big deal. I had forgotten, but yeah, it was a big deal. I think if I had, a young Karolina in the car crying, first of all, I think my heart would break. Because I don't want to be in that position. And it's really hard. It's really hard. It's really hard. First, I think inside my heart would break for me or for whoever. And then I think I would really focus on what that person is trying to do. In terms of, and it's something I probably didn't want to hear at that age, but you're disabled and you're different and it's harder for you and all this. And I was so stubborn. And it's just I didn't want to hear how different I was and how much harder it is for me. And I knew it was so much harder for me. That thing I knew, because I trained harder than anybody, but I would fall 3 times in a race. And it frustrated me because I would see my able-bodied friends not really trying and they'd beat me, of course. So it's at the point you get to when you become a high performance athlete where, yes, you're competing at the highest level and you're competing against people who are also at the highest level and well matched with you, I would say. But at that point, people often, you mentioned, my rivalry with Pud and other racers, you are not thinking about them. And if you are, you're in trouble. You have got to be thinking 100% about you. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I mean in a way of, this is the work I've done, or if it's a young Karolina, this is what I want to be doing. So you focus on that. The external stuff actually doesn't matter at all. And the best illustration I can give of this is when I was a young Paralympian on my first games in Nagano, Japan in 1998, I had won every Super G on the World Cup tour leading into Nagano. So I was fairly confident I should win the Paralympic Super G. And I think I came second. I was devastated. I was just now, if I got a silver medal in Super G, I'd be like, yeah, that rocks. But then it was like a kick in the teeth. I was devastated. And my goals had been all about the medals. I'm going to get this medal in this race, this medal. And not that that was wrong. Fast forward to 2010, where I had to, go through all the concussions, make a comeback and really think about why I was making a comeback. And I was working with John, the sports psychologist. And I was able to make my goal far more broad And my goal was to train and become the best skier I'd ever been, which is saying a lot because I'd already been pretty good, but to be the best I'd ever been. And then the results would come on their own. And that's what I mean by focus on yourself. Because that's all I did. I just focused on skiing my best. And actually, some of the best skiing I did was in the giant slalom, and I came fourth. And it's not really on my CV, but I remember that race.
Yeah.
And my coaches were like, you were on fire. And I'm like, I was on fire. It was so good. And I didn't get a medal. And it was a little bit disappointing, but I was so happy because I skied so well. And usually, if you're lucky, it lines up.
Yeah.
Not always. But so to that young Karolina or whoever, it's hard when you're that young and you're just starting out. It's hard. And of course, it's competitive sport. You're competing against others. So it doesn't make sense on the surface to say, well, how can I not worry? You can't worry about what they're doing, how able-bodied they are or disabled or what the factor is. That was not, you had to forget, you have to put those things aside. And as Gary said as well, he's like, the factor at the classification system, the factor, all these things that pertain to the Paralympics, these are the rules of the game. Whether they are fair or not is a whole other story. And just to say that in Olympic sport, doping is the main issue in terms of, cheating and so on. In Paralympic sport, it is absolutely classification and factoring systems. Doping is not so much an issue. The issue is, are people being classified correctly? And are the various factor systems within each sport, because I'd be classified differently in swimming because I have upper body strength. Yes. So it's sport specific. Are they fair? And most of the time, I'll be honest, they're not. They're not perfect and they're not necessarily fair. And so if you go in, you have to go into it thinking, am I willing to accept the rules of this imperfect game? And then be like me. And you have to kind of be like me. You have to just say, screw it. I'm going to give it everything I have. And yeah, going back to your question, now I see where you were headed. Were there times that I should have won? Yes, there were times, and not necessarily against Pud, actually, but there were other times when I absolutely should have been the winner of the race. And I wasn't because of the factor. And I just had to accept that. And it's hard. I'm still struggling with that, but then again, now I'm like, okay, my skiing career is over. I can still take the 95% of wonderful things that I experienced and received, and nothing is perfect. But to that young Karolina, it's really try to just, and at that age, I don't know that we're even capable of that, of focusing on yourself, which sometimes I feel like maybe makes that young Karolina feel like she's even more apart. But if you can do that, I think the thing is, throughout my life, whether I realized it or not, like, who is Karolina? Somewhere deep inside was a little spark that started when I was really little. And this defiant, stubborn spark and person. And even when I'm at my lowest and crying and stuff, I think it's still in there. And I think every human being actually has that. It's some kind of survival thing, instinct, exactly. So you got to believe that it's there and you'll survive.
Thanks so much for all your time, all these testimonials. It was incredibly interesting and passionate. For people who are going to be at the Paris Paralympic Games and want to reach out to you, what's the best way to contact you?
Good luck, because I'm going to be busy. Well, I would say so.
Or if people want after the games to have
and at the games they should too. Well, I am on Instagram, so it's Karolina.Anna.Wisniewska. You could just Google that. And my Instagram's not the greatest, but I am on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook. So I think probably Instagram during the games would probably be the best way, depending if it's a professional, because it took me forever to get back to you. I'm on LinkedIn, but I will say during the games, it probably won't, I'll be super focused on being a co-chef, but I absolutely invite everybody to reach out to me or to the Canadian Paralympic Committee has actually set up for the first time a fan zone. Mm-hmm. I think it's called the Canadian Paralympic Committee Crew, CREW. And so anybody in Canada or anywhere really who is a fan of the Paralympic movement or the Canadian team, they can become part of the crew and follow along. The Canadian Paralympic Committee itself is, they're the ones who give out all the new press releases every day and all of that stuff. So you can certainly follow along there. And then CBC Radio-Canada is doing way more, they're doing way more hours. So you should be able online at CBC or Radio-Canada, as you choose, you should be able to find more information and more stuff being streamed live than ever before. So that's the Paralympic Games. But of course, if you want to get in touch with me, you can do that too.
Yeah, because you're also doing conferences, right? So
yes.
After the games, if people want to reach out to you to come talk to a conference.
Yes. I'm with, I do my conferences with ADN Conférencier. They're based here in Montreal, but we do stuff in France. We do stuff a bit all over. So wherever,
So go on Instagram during the Olympic Games and to Etienne, ADN.
Yes, so it's ADN Conférencier. ADN like DNA in French.
Yes. Okay.
So ADN would be ADN. I don't know what their name is. ADN conferences in English. I was thinking in French because we're here in Montreal.
Cool. Thanks again.
Thank you.
It was an incredible time.
It was really fun.
Very good.